Chapter 260 Prince Jin's Royal Manor, 11. Nangong Luoyan. This debt, I will carefully calculate for you. Su Luo bit down on her teeth, with an expression like she was on the verge of exploding. After asking a servant, she found out that Nangong Luoyan was in the dining hall. Su Luo walked directly towards the hall. When Nangong Luoyan saw Su Luo, the corner of his mouth was curved into a demonically enchanting smiling expression, and he briskly beckoned with his hand. Little Luo, quickly come over here. Coming early is not as good as coming here in a timely manner. You came just in time. Su Luo stood firmly in front of him, and indifferently cast a glance at him. Nangong Luoyan appeared not to be aware of Su Luo's anger. He seemed to be in a cheerful mood as he pulled her over, pressing the taciturn her to sit down on a chair made from red sandalwood. He spoke to the respectful servant standing on the side. This king's little Luo is hungry. Why have the dishes not been served yet? Faced with Nangong Luoyan's enthusiasm, Su Luo seemed to be speechless. This man was really strange. Before, he was coldly scowling at her in the bathing chamber, until they finally parted on bad terms. He had a sad expression back then, but now it seemed as if that had never happened. All the servants standing on the side had an incredulous expression as they looked at their master, His Highness. Their gazes clearly expressed how unimaginable they found the situation, to the point that they almost didn't hear Nangong Luoyan's order. Why haven't you quickly left? Nangong Luoyan's voice was clear and moderate, but it had a slightly furious might that was powerfully threatening. The servants looked at each other in dismay with terrified expressions. They nervously and tensely withdrew to bring the dishes without delay. It was also no wonder they would forget themselves in this way. After all, they had served His Highness in Prince Jin's royal manor for more than 10 years. They had never seen His Highness treat someone this enthusiastically. He was so enthusiastic that he had lowered his tone to seem almost humble. Moreover, he was treating a woman this way. Prince Jin's royal manor had always prevented women from entering. Even Her Highness the Princess would wait at the manor's door, not daring to take half a step into the door. However, now, they unexpectedly saw a woman sit at the same table as His Highness. Moreover, His Highness was actually unexpectedly also coaxing her. Was this still His Highness Prince Jin, the one they respected as a god from the 9th layers of heaven? Su Luo wasn't aware of her special treatment in Prince Jin's royal manor. She also wasn't aware that the servants looked at her with an expression, as if watching an immortal fairy. She only felt that she was almost about to be infuriated to death by Nangong Luoyan. What was the matter with this guy? Why was he incessantly picking up various foods and putting them into her bowl? Okay, quickly eat your own food. The stuff in my bowl have almost piled up into a small mountain. Su Luo had no alternative but to shield the bowl in front of her and resentfully glare at Nangong Luoyan. Nangong Luoyan, do you want to fatten me to death? The circle of servants standing on the side, without exception, inhaled a breath of cold air. Had this young lady lost her mind? She actually dared to speak like this to His Highness? They sympathetically closed their eyes. They were able to forecast that afterwards on top of the table, it was sure to change into purgatory. It would be covered with a river of blood, because His Highness would absolutely never ever tolerate someone angrily rebuking him. People still remembered the last time in the imperial palace, Marquis and family's third miss, because she admired His Highness, had said a few extra words in front of His Highness when he was eating. That pitiful miss was sent directly flying by one palm strike from His Highness, and spit out blood on the spot. Afterwards, she took 3 full months to heal from her internal injuries. However, what made them all taken aback was in their eyes, the callous and heartless His Highness Prince Jin, who was like Azura from hell. He was actually smiling in a devilishly charming manner non-stop. Moreover, he actually took the opportunity to lean in close to that young lady. His hand, which was as fine as white jade, lifted up her clean and fair tapered chin. His gaze was filled with an intoxicating gentle feelings, with a touch of seductiveness, when looking at her. Seductive, a touch of seductiveness. Even though using these kind of words to describe His Highness's expression seemed to be odd, however, in fact, there didn't seem to be another word that would be a better fit. Chapter 261. Prince Jin's Royal Manor, 12. Moreover, Their Highness Prince Jean actually used that sort of tempting and coaxing tone, a soft misty rain-like voice to speak. Luo Luo, be obedient, you are so thin. Eating a bit more will help you grow up faster. Heaven, heaven, heavens, ah. The circle of servants collectively hyperventilated. They were simply in chaos at his manner. Was this still that unwavering killer that cut down everyone, killing people as if cutting up vegetables? His Highness, who due to a brief disagreeable remark, would be fond of cutting off a hand or foot. That Prince Jean? Who had possessed the body of their family's highness. This was simply too terrifying. However, the present Nangong Liu, in as far as Su Luo was concerned, was someone she was best familiar with. Because all along in front of her, Nangong Luyan had always been in this frivolous, devilishly charming and alluring mode. Therefore, she was not even a bit unable to adapt to this. Su Luo single-handedly pried off his finely jointed finger and angrily shot him a glare. When eating, you should eat it properly, stop groping around. You don't even understand even a little bit of the rules. Once these words were spoken, Nangong Luyan didn't seem to have any reaction, but the circle of servants were all scared silly. They simply could not imagine that in this world, the miss in front of their eyes would dare to rush forward to throw away her life. How could she dare to speak those words to His Highness? She deserved the greatest praise for courage, and she was too incomparably brave. They deeply sympathized with the bitter experience Su Luo was about to suffer. However, they were astonished again. Their family's highness unexpectedly wasn't angry. Not only was he not angry, but instead, he openly started to laugh heartily. He was laughing so hard that his body started to rock back and forth. Once he finished laughing, wouldn't he execute the punishment? Nope, he didn't. Their Highness not only didn't penalize this miss, but he was actually pleased as a punch and hugged her. He was continuously trying to exploit any chance to get closer to her. The more that Miss tried to resist, the more enthusiastic he became. The style was simply like that of a lecher. Finished, His Highness's body was definitely possessed. If it were not so, then this miss would have already died 8 to 10 times. Then, how could she still be sitting at the dining table eating her meal? No matter how shocked, incredulous and mind-boggled the servants were, Nangong Luyan was just like so, forcing Su Luo to swallow down that enormous bowl of food. Su Luo, without much choice, was finally able to put down her bowl and chopsticks. Her cold gaze looked straight at Nangong Luyan. Okay, now that I have also eaten a meal, shouldn't you let me return to my manor? She had already come out for a while now. If she returned too late, she couldn't guess what other things might happen in the manor. Su Qing and Su Shi were both covetously watching her courtyard. Nangong Luyan calmly placed a hand on the table, slanted his head, and faintly smilingly glanced at her. Little Luo Luo, you really want to go back? What do you mean? Su Luo's expression tightened. Nangong Luoyan's perfectly composed expression, while watching Su Luo, made her heart feel somewhat scared. Nangong Luoyan's brows knotted. Then a smile appeared on his handsome face, and opening his arms, his hands beckoned towards Su Luo. Su Luo suspiciously threw a glance at him, but couldn't contain the curiosity in her heart. She took a few small steps to walk towards him until she stood firmly in front of him, and said with a frown, "If you have something to say, say it. Don't be so mysterious and secretive." Able to use this kind of tone and attitude to speak to His Highness Prince Jean. In the entire world, there was only one person, Su Luo. Only Su Luo herself didn't know it. Nangong Luyan didn't seem to mind the tiniest bit with regards to Su Luo's attitude. He stretched out his hand, and with one pull, encircled Su Luo in his embrace. When Su Luo started to struggle, he was unruffled and calmly said one sentence. Little Luo Luo, based on your intelligence, could it be that you have never thought about the current situation? Chapter 262, Prince Jin's Royal Manor 13, Situation? Su Luo frowned and didn't speak further. Okay, put yourself in his shoes and think it over. If you were that despicable boy from the Lu family, right, what would you do afterwards? Nangong Liuyun's warm and heated breath puffed out near Su Luo's sensitive ear, messing with Su Luo until she started to itch from the bottom of her heart. Su Luo pushed that handsome face far, far away, and lowered her head to start pondering this deeply. If she was Lu Qingfeng, since he had set down such a huge capital to track her, then he definitely wouldn't give up so easily. Since he had clearly followed the other party along and knew that she had entered Prince Jin's royal manor, then Su Luo suddenly lifted her head, unaware that Nangong Luyan was in the process of moving closer to her. The bang sound rang loudly. Su Luo's forehead hit Nangong Luyan's nose. It became so sore that the rim of his eyes was slightly red. Su Luo's heart was remorseful. Feeling embarrassed, she helped him massage his nose. You nothing wrong, right? Is it serious? Seldom would she get to see Nangong Luyan suffer defeat in front of her. On her face, her expression was worried, but her heart was already flipping over in laughter. It's important, very important. It's serious, very serious. Nangong covered his nose and swept a glance at her with a plaintive expression. Hearing this, Su Luo rightfully smiled coldly. She never thought that His Highness Prince Jin would act like a child and throw a tantrum. It was indeed really amusing. She was seldom in such a good mood, so she used a happy voice to coax him. Then you say, what should we do? Help me blow on it. Nangong Luyan wrinkled his brows, pointed to his red and swollen nose. Just a moment ago, when she saw the nose, it wasn't this red, pretend, continue pretending. Su Luo very disdainfully swept a glance at him and said, Is His Highness Prince Jin still a child? You actually believe this stuff? Just blowing on it and it would heal? Really naive, just like a little kid. Wasn't he afraid that people would laugh at him? Sure enough, that circle of servants, each and every one of them had bowed their head with eyes lowered. Their faces were red from restraining their laughter. With one sweep of His Highness Prince Jin's eyes, immediately, it was as if the hottest days of summer were covered with snow and frost. Their expressions all of a sudden became frozen stiff. Every one of their heads lowered in shame, an appearance of being stiff and not daring to move. They didn't even dare to breathe. Supreme dominance. Power was authority. Su Luo silently cursed in her heart. She sincerely sympathized with the servants standing on the side. To have to wait upon His Highness who was Satan-like, with temperamental and indeterminate gloomy mood swings. Weren't their toil way too hard? Unexpectedly, when Nangong Luyan turned his head towards her, he looked lost with a pitiful expression. He accusingly looked at her. Painful, it really is very painful. Such a childish manner. Su Luo bit down on her teeth. She really wanted to shake off this pretending to be adorable His Highness Prince Jin. However, once her eyes met that pair of limpid, misty and lovely pair of eyes, she was defeated in a moment. Okay. Help you blow on it. I'll help you blow on it. Su Luo distastefully cast him a glance, with one hand pulling his hand away from his nose. She stooped down, took a deep breath and blew on his nose. She perfunctorily blew on his nose 2 times. Then with one hand, she pushed him away and bluntly stood up saying, Is it okay now? You are not taking responsibility. Nangong Luyan had an accusing expression while covering his nose. When he said this, his posture was like that of a spoiled child. How am I not being responsible? Su Luo had an expression full of misgivings. Nangong Luyan really did immediately sit down, looking at Su Luo. Shouldn't you be cupping the other's face, speaking softly and comforting me? Afterwards, shouldn't you tenderly and softly blow on it? This kind of Nangong Luyan really made her feel like wanting to weep but lacking the tears. Su Luo let out a loud yell. You really have too many requests. Nangong Luyan's face had an innocent expression, half reclining on the chair made of red sandalwood. He glanced at Su Luo and leisurely said, The other stuff, I won't demand it from you. However, you should at least blow on it a few more times, right? This is the most basic thing, and you weren't able to complete it. When he said this, he actually had an appearance of being somewhat wronged. Chapter 263. Prince Jin's Royal Manor 14. The veins on Su Luo's forehead were about to explode. She tightly clenched her fists and glared at him furiously. She simply gave up on talking sense into this evildoer. Why must it be me who does it? The last thing you lack at your residence are servants. In all likelihood, just one command from His Highness Prince Jin, and an innumerable number of servants would crawl to wait upon him. Su Luo sent a glare his way while speaking the truth. Nangong Liuyun's serene and unperturbed gaze swept the circle of servants whose heads were bowed from embarrassment. Just a light, casual sweeping glance. However, as far as the surrounding servants were concerned, His Highness Prince Jin's faint glance immediately gave them the feeling of an icy autumn gale sweeping away the fallen leaves. It was harsh and desolate. His Highness, we will first take our leave." The circle of servants all kneeled with respect and trepidation. Their entire body was trembling in fear and anxiety. Nangong Luyan had one hand raised to his forehead and lightly hummed, seemingly in answer. "Hey, don't you guys leave so urgently." Su Luo watched helplessly. When these servants left, then wouldn't Nangong Luyan be even more intent on wanting a mile when given an inch? However, Su Luo's voice to these servants was like a sign pressuring them to continue. At the beginning they were still walking. When Su Luo spoke, then practically all of them ran. In a split second, all of them disappeared without a trace. Seeing this, Su Luo simply wanted to cry but had no tears. She said to Nangong Luyan with a dumbfounded expression, "Does every one of your servants know the martial arts move Ling Bo Wei Bu 1? It was simply too fast." Fleeing for one's life at the critical juncture, their potential would naturally be unlimited. Nangong Luyan lightly snorted, and once again changed the subject. "Come here, beg for forgiveness for yourself." "Nangong Luyan, you better not push your luck." Su Luo stood determinedly at a distance and glared at him in displeasure. Nangong Luyan's eyes drooped down. After a long time, it once again silently lifted up to glance at Su Luo. Others say that having benefited from someone's small favors, it should be doubly repaid. Why don't you consider it as repaying a small favor? She couldn't bear his faint sigh and dejected manner. Su Luo conceded defeat and slowly walked to in front of him, softly asking, "In the end, what do you really want?" Actually, what he said was right. When she hid under his horse carriage, indeed, she really ought to thank him. If it weren't for him showing up just in time by chance, she wouldn't have escaped Lu Qingfeng's pursuit, because of the tracking imprint he had placed on her. Nangong Luyan raised his head to look at her. His tone had a touch of a spoiled child throwing a tantrum. "Tonight, you should stay and keep me company." This man was truly reaching for the mile when given an inch. He would seize such a small favor to coerce her. He had also made the use of coercion seem so righteous and proper. However, how could she agree to stay behind? This promise would represent her making a certain degree of concession. Her staying overnight at Prince Jin's royal manor. If it were to be spread out by other people, then how would they view this? What would people think about this? How could she get back her innocence? In the future, how could she righteously and confidently pursue her own happiness? Therefore, faced with his request, she didn't say a word. "Stay behind to keep me company," he repeated again. "This matter, I'm afraid, is not possible." Su Luo softly replied, her gaze steadily fixed on his. Nangong Luyan didn't speak. Suddenly, after quite a while, the corner of his mouth pulled slightly apart, and he started to smile in a devilishly charming manner. "Foolish Luo Luo, you are simply too slow-witted. Without this king's consent, how could you leave this royal manor?" After all, his soft manner and humble air, pretending to be pitiful and cutely beseeching her just a moment ago, it was merely just one type of tactic. The thing he set his mind to and the person he was determined to have, he would never let go. "Nangong Luyan, you are shameless." Su Luo naturally knew of this point. It was not like she hadn't tried to go out. She simply could not exit the gate of even the Qin Palace section of the manor. She had been immediately blocked at the gate. "Shameless, huh? This king could even be a little more shameless. Do you want to experience it?" Nangong Luyan had a proud expression on his face, while smilingly watching her. 1. Ling Bo Wei Bu is a superior martial arts move from Jin Yong's books. It's a light body qinggong, footwork that avoids all enemy attack. P.S. Jin Yong is one of the most famous writers of martial arts, and most of his books were made into kung fu movies or TV series more than once. Chapter 264. Prince Jin's Royal Manor 15. Don't get ahead of yourself. Su Luo furiously glared at him. Obedient Luo Luo, don't be angry. In fact, you have also thought that Lu Qingfeng has surely sent a countless number of people to hide by my manor's gate to wait for you. Little Luo Luo, once you go out, you will walk into a trap. My family's little Luo Luo wouldn't be that dumb, right? Nangong Luoyan had both hands crossed in front of his chest, with a sinister smile on his face. If your Highness Prince Jin were to issue a few words, how could Lu Qingfeng dare not withdraw his people? Su Luo grinded her teeth and coldly responded. Nangong Luoyan innocently shrugged his shoulders with his arms open and hands facing up, and he obstinately shook his head. Foolish Luo Luo, one favor after another. You still haven't repaid my kindness yet. How could this king continue to do more favors for you? If there are too many favors, then you will have to repay them with your flesh. This wouldn't be fair to you. This man didn't seem to have any limit. Su Luo made a fist while being speechless. What you said is right. Too many favors are indeed hard to pay back. Nangong Luoyan gracefully nodded his head, replying as if it was only logical. Yes, therefore tonight, you should first return some interest. Su Luo speechlessly asked. How do you want to be repaid? Nangong Luoyan suddenly started to smile in a devilishly charming manner. His smile could enchant all living things. Obedient Luo Luo, this I have to ask you. How much are you prepared to pay back? Repay only the interest? Repay the capital amount? Or pay back both the capital and interest together? Su Luo was still speechless. She never thought that his head would have so many tricky twists and turns. She glared directly at him. How to pay back the interest? How to pay back the capital? And also what methods should be used to repay both the capital and interest? Nangong Luoyan's eyes drooped down halfway and leisurely said, there are many details to pay attention to. However, tonight, this king will explain it to you one at a time. You shouldn't be so impatient, we have plenty of time. Who was impatient? Su Luo swept him a very despising glance and said, your thinking had better be a bit purer. In fact, this sentence was full of many meanings. It also made her attitude very clear. Tonight she really had to stay here. Without Nangong Luoyan's order, she really couldn't leave Prince Jin's royal manor. Even if she was able to leave Prince Jin's royal manor, she still didn't know how dangerous it was outside of the manor. Only, tonight was doomed to not be peaceful. Su Luo had already been somewhat mentally prepared. But the final development in this matter had gone beyond her expectations. Night. The sky appeared as if draped in a black layer of light muslin. In the lonely sky hung a few remnant stars, giving off a dim and bleak luster. Su Luo came to her senses from her contemplation. Glancing at the color of the sky, she discovered it was pretty late. Where is my room? Su Luo asked with a frown after pulling a maid who was hurriedly passing by to a stop. Half of the night had already passed, and yet no one had come to inform her where she should sleep tonight. Su Luo's expression said she couldn't understand this. When that maid heard the question, her body immediately jumped and she was alarmed. At once, she kneeled down and begged for forgiveness. Young lady, this this servant doesn't know. You should go and ask His Highness yourself. I beg you to spare this servant. Was her appearance that scary? Why was it that when the servant saw her, it was as if she had seen a ghost? Su Luo somewhat dumbfoundedly touched her own delicate and beautiful cheeks. This face ought to be quite pretty. Once she grew up a bit, she ought to be a complete devastatingly beautiful little belle. However, the maid kneeling on the ground continuously begged for forgiveness. She was beseeching Su Luo to let her go. Su Luo was simply out of ideas and bluntly said, Okay, tell me where your family's highness is. I will go ask him myself. His Highness is at a bedroom in the Qin Palace courtyard. The maid very carefully said, Fine, you can go now. Su Luo waved her hand and sent the maid away. In Prince Jin's royal manor for a brief half-day period, Su Luo didn't discover anything else, but she found that the reverence of the servants here for His Highness Prince Jin came from the bottom of their hearts. Chapter 265. Romance in Prince Jin's Manor. 1. Each and every one of them kept quiet out of fear in front of Nangong Luoyan. They were even afraid to breathe out loud, simply trembling and shivering, as if having caught sight of Yama, the king of hell. Su Luo was somewhat bewildered. Although Nangong Luyan, this person, despised following conventions sometimes, and acted like a hooligan other times, why would the servants be scared of him this much? Su Luo remained perplexed as she continued to ponder this while walking. Very soon, she arrived at his bedroom. Su Luo noiselessly pushed open the door and looked inside. Presently, Nangong Luyan had his hands behind his back and was standing quietly in front of the window that had been pushed open. His pair of black eyes was looking out at the horizon, which was sparsely populated with remnant stars. His gorgeous soft robe was made of golden silk embroidered with pretty and flirtatious flowers of North India. His jet-black, silky, soft hair flowed down, carrying a kind of refined wild and rashness manner that was the ultimate in attractiveness. His face, which was slanted to the side, was perfection, like an ancient Greek sculpture of an exquisite god, flirtatious and threatening. Hearing a noise, he unhurriedly turned his head. A pair of black eyes full of smiles looked at Su Luo. His smile was as gorgeous and dazzling as the blooming cherry blossoms in March. At this time, Su Luo only felt her own heart skip a beat. A kind of unprecedented exotic feeling made her chest area closest to her heart become limp and numb. Her pulse started to speed up and was hard to control. "Come here." Nangong Luyan gracefully crooked his finger towards Su Luo. Every movement of his was pronounced, respectable, and intense. Su Luo merely looked at him, not speaking, but also not moving. Nangong Luyan cast a bantering glance towards her. "Dilly-dallying, what, afraid?" Su Luo raised an eyebrow, glaring at him. "What's there to be afraid of? Why should I be afraid? Do you look very frightening?" Nangong Luyan's body turned around and moved. In the blink of an eye, Su Luo had already landed in his embrace. He lowered his head and looked at her. His indolent and deep voice, in the tranquil night, had a thread of deep huskiness. "Yeah, this King's Luo Luo is the bravest. How could you be scared?" While he was speaking, he used his slender finger to caress her fair and tender cheeks, which were like water. "Speak properly, don't get fresh with me." Su Luo threw him an annoyed glance. Nangong Luyan's eyebrow rose slightly. His glance was deep, flirtatious and moving. "We can talk on one hand while touching each other on the other hand. It doesn't hinder anything. Little Luo Luo, what are you being so bashful about?" Su Luo only felt that surrounding her body was a male smell that was distinctively his. The breath she inhaled into her lungs all had his smell. Her face was slightly red. She pushed him away with one shove. Her face became serious and firm as she said, "Nangong Luyan, don't change the subject. I want to ask you, since you forced me to remain behind, where should I sleep tonight?" A touch of doubt flashed through his beautiful eyes. Afterwards, as if it was right and expected, he said, "Foolish Luo Luo, do you really need to ask this question? Naturally, you would be sleeping here." Su Luo felt her breath being stifled in her throat, and her eyes started to narrow dangerously. She glared at Nangong Luyan, saying and emphasizing each word. "What did you just say?" Nangong Luyan fluidly and gracefully moved to pour 2 cups of amber-colored red wine. With his eyes drooping down, he leisurely swirled the wine. "Nangong Luyan, clearly tell it to me." Su Luo was a little flustered and exasperated as she let out a snort. She was forced by circumstances to remain behind. However, this did not mean she would sleep in the same room with him. Nangong Luyan's drooping eyebrow rose slightly. His serene and flowing eyes secretly stared at Su Luo. The corner of his mouth, little by little, stretched into a smile that was seductive and moving. It was also as noble as the gods. "Humph. Not going to tell me clearly, huh? Then I will leave right now." Su Luo, panting with rage, turned around and was just about to leave. However, she had barely passed by Nangong Luyan's side before her arm was pulled to a stop by him. Nangong Luyan raised his head. His sexy throat moved. In one mouthful, he swallowed the amber-colored red wine. When he was drinking the wine, his pair of deep black eyes was continuously giving off a burning light that was motionlessly fixed on Su Luo. Chapter 266, Romance in Prince Jin's Manor 2. At the corner of his bright red lips, a dark red droplet was rolling down. He immediately gave her the impression of being devilishly charming, alluring but also brutal, savage and bloodthirsty. He also gave off a sensation of a blood-sucking, noble vampire from the Middle Ages who was handsome, elegant and seductive. Nangong Luoyan in this state was handsome beyond compare, luring people to simply commit a major crime of passion. Let go. Meeting with a wolf-like, coarse and wild gaze that was fixed on her, Su Luo's heart was inevitably a little frenetic. Her body's natural instinct for danger made her want to turn around and flee, trying to escape far away from his control. However, before she could shake off Nangong Luoyan, the opposing party took unfair advantage of her proximity and advanced. His arm was like an iron clamp, unyielding and powerful, firmly stopping her and holding on to her slender waist. A magnified, large handsome face appeared in front of her. His slightly narrowed phoenix eyes with hidden depths were like the undisturbed sea. Once again, wind appeared to give rise to large waves in them, emitting a disdain for the world that was overbearing and tyrannical. Nangong. This kind of meaningful expression would simply startle people's hearts. Su Luo had spoken just 2 words, before he bent down and seized the corner of her soft lips. Now he was like a bold and powerful cheetah from an African prairie, erotic, coarse and wild. He fiercely nibbled and bit at his own most beloved prey. He transferred a full mouthful of red wine to Su Luo. The sudden assault of the wine choked her until she coughed. She started to struggle, as if her life depended on it. Nangong Luoyan's strong and powerful large palm suddenly imprisoned her into his chest. The other large palm was holding the back of her head, from top to bottom confining her in place, making Su Luo's struggle and resistance to no avail. The feverish kiss that was earth-shattering was also tyrannical and emphatic, not allowing refusal. Their lips and tongues intertwined, charming, romantic and natural. His kiss was incomparably overbearing, strategically besieging the inside of her mouth, pressing on her until there was nowhere to flee to. She had no choice and was forced to respond to his passion. The surroundings were silent and quiet. An ambiguous aura burst forth into the sky of the desolate night. The faint warm, summer grass smell that was distinctively from Nangong Luoyan's body drew near her nose, carrying an opium-like, sinfully strong allure, making her entire spirit tremble. At this time, Su Luo's mind was completely blank. She forgot to resist and lost all rational thoughts. She lost herself and practically lost all control, becoming intoxicated with the tender, homey feeling he wove. She sank deeply into it, and could not free herself. Nangong Luoyan's coarse, wild and overbearing gale-like stormy kiss began to calm down. It softened and became a breeze-like drizzle that was soft and silky. It was also as gentle as the touch of a dragonfly skimming the water's surface, as if a long time had passed. Only then did Nangong Luoyan reluctantly leave the corner of her lips that made people want to commit a crime. Only his pair of large hands was still tenderly cupping her very small cheeks. He was earnestly and carefully staring at her. That pair of demonically charming, red-rimmed phoenix eyes blurred in passing for a split second. The surroundings were quiet. There was only the sound of their slightly chaotic gasps for breath. The bright moonlight cast a disproportionate shadow on the ground. The wind outside the window blew gently. Now inside the room, there was a strange, flirtatious feeling of the calm before the storm. No one was willing to break this quiet mood. You went too far. Su Luo angrily uttered in rebuke, with a displeased expression of having been violated. Originally, she thought her voice would sound wrathful. But the matter that made it even more difficult for her indignation was that her voice now sounded soft, weak and lacking strength. It was hoarse, deep and low, as if trapped by lust and hard to extricate from herself. Rather than sounding like an angry rebuke, it sounded more like wanting to resist while still welcoming the blame. This kind of tone made even Su Luo herself unable to continue listening to it. She turned her head away, and gradually adjusted her disordered mood. The corner of Nangong Luoyan's mouth lifted into a smile. He unhurriedly tidied up her conspicuously messy hair. His languid movement seemed a little blurred. Silly Luo, are you this fond of this king kissing you? Su Luo's previous breath choked back in her throat. Chapter 267. Romance in Prince Jin's Manor 3. This was what you call her liking it? It was clearly forced on her, okay? Su Luo's eyes were as cold as the water in autumn, and full of indignation. She grinded out everything word by word. Nangong Luyin, you better not be flaunting it just because you got away with taking cheap advantage of me. Having already gotten away with taking cheap advantage, and being secretly happy was enough. But to actually come and flaunt it, this would just provoke more fury. Nangong Liuyin's strong and powerful arms took the opportunity to encircle her, drawing Su Luo in front of him into his embrace. He had a pleased with himself expression, and his tone was smooth. You still aren't willing to admit it? Just a moment ago, who was it that clung to this king and wouldn't let go? Such a bashful little thing. Su Luo's face was scarlet from holding back. Her fist smashed towards Nangong Liuyin's chest with a fiendish and monstrous expression. If you are seeking death, just say so. Don't be so subtle. Nangong Liuyin's pitch-black eyes flashed with a trace of being pleased with himself. He hugged Su Luo even tighter to him, pasting her entire body to his, and not leaving a tiny seam in between them. He calmly and composedly said, My family's Luo Luo is the one who would hate to let go. If this king dies, then you must accompany this king to die together. Su Luo coldly snorted. Such beautiful wishful thinking. Who would accompany you to die together? In any case, that person is not me. Being hard-mouthed, Nangong Luyin leaned over and kissed the edge of her soft lips. Inch by inch, he lightly, gently and softly kissed her. His actions were exquisite and tender, compared to before, which was the kind of plundering like the blast of torrential rain. They were completely different methods. Su Luo instinctively wanted to dodge, but anything that Nangong Luyin wanted to do, how could he leave it unfinished? One could only see Nangong Luyin placing both of her hands behind her back. His other hand cupped the curvature of her fair, soft and lovable chin. He greedily sampled the smell that belonged only to her. There was nowhere for Su Luo to escape to. In all fairness, her heart considered his smell to be amazing. That kind of smell which was like the warm spring grass when cherry blossoms bloomed in March could intoxicate a person. Dazzling, giddying and swoon-worthy, twisting and turning to nibble away deep into her bone with its ecstasy. It was as if just by touching, it would taint you and make you an addict, never willing to stop. Slowly he let her go, caressing her prominently outlined, ravished red lips. The corner of Nangong Liuyin's mouth curved up in satisfaction. His phoenix eyes were content and lazy like a leopard's. This is the first time this king has the benefit of enjoying. Afterwards, only this king will be able to enjoy it, memorized it yet. Seeing the satisfied Nangong Luyin with his phoenix eyes slightly closed, a furious feeling of having choked back being wronged for a long time, all of a sudden streaked across Su Luo's heart. Then she sneered and said, Nangong Luyin, you are rather too naive, okay? Su Luo pointed to her own ravished red lips, which started to curve into an enigmatic grim smile. This here, how could it have been enjoyed only by you alone? Once these words were out, the tranquil atmosphere was as if cold frost had descended. In a flash, the temperature dropped to as low as an icehouse's. The air in the atmosphere immediately condensed into ice and frost. It was bone-chillingly cold. Nangong Liuyin's deep and distant eyes momentarily squeezed out icy and strict rays of light. His incomparably handsome face became clouded and shrouded in a layer of icy frost. From head to toe, he was producing and scattering a terrifying aura. His serene expression now embodied a scathing aura of death, savage and reeking of blood. He ruthlessly and very darkly glared at Su Luo. That pair of eyes that was brimming with cockiness, just a moment ago now burst forth with a chilliness that would stop a person's beating heart. In this split second, a feeling of vexation flashed through Su Luo's heart. However, she really never expected that Nangong Liuyin's reaction would be this large. It was merely a kiss. He would actually care about it this much? If he knew about her joining the romantic dating scene in the modern era, and playing according to those rules, wouldn't he have gone insane from fury? Su Luo's heart was a little uneasy. Suddenly, she felt that she lacked some confidence. However, what was she to be afraid of? Also, who was she to him? Why should she allow him to control her every move? Thinking up to here, Su Luo became full of confidence. She bravely confronted Nangong Liuyin's murderous-looking gaze. Chapter 268. Romance in Prince Jin's Manor 4. At this moment, Both were sharply opposing each other, with neither prepared to give an inch. They were both fiercely glaring at each other. Neither was willing to be outdone. Who else? Nangong Liuyan's phoenix eyes were half-narrowed dangerously. His eyes had a kind of chilliness that would stop a person's heart from beating. A pair of bloodthirsty pupils firmly stared at Su Luo, like a berserk beast. Su Luo's heart was a little lacking in confidence, but her face hardly showed any weakness. She bravely retorted back. Why would it concern you? Is it something you can control? This sentence was as if she had suddenly poked at a hornet's nest. Nangong Liuyan's eyes were like a sharp blade curved from a millennium-old block of ice, ruthlessly launched at Su Luo. His furious thoughts grew without restraint, stressing each word he said. You say that again one more time. Su Luo had a little guilty conscience, but having arrived at this juncture, whoever showed weakness would stand on the losing side. Therefore, Su Luo bravely lifted up her chin. She unblinkingly returned his glare with a glare. My affairs have nothing to do with you. Before it was unrelated to you. Now it's unrelated to you. And in the future, it will be even more unrelated to you. Nangong Liuyan's darkening face was about to explode like a tempest at any moment, and his eyes flashed with a bloodthirsty frost. Now, the moon in the sky was hidden among a thick layer of clouds. All of a sudden, a flash of lightning streaked past. Following close behind, the rumbling of thunder started to sound in the silence of the night. The weather at this moment suddenly changed. A gale-like wind bellowed and heavy torrential rain poured down. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. The sky that was clear suddenly became cloudy, shining upon the side of Nangong Liuyan's matchless handsome face. It made him look even more malicious and sinister. He looked so cruel that people wouldn't dare to look straight at him. Suddenly, his lanky and jade-like fingers grabbed and pinched Su Luo's throat. A kind of panic-stricken feeling of having her breathing cut off started to spread through Su Luo's heart. However, Su Luo did not beg for forgiveness. She merely tried to break open his hand through sheer obstinacy, using all her strength. However, the level disparity was that obvious. The contrast in strength could be seen at a glance. How could the second-ranked Su Luo be the seventh-ranked Nangong Liuyan's opponent? Still even more so, the Nangong Liuyan right now had sunk straight into a rash, ruthless state of mind. He was even more unwilling to back off and let go. No matter how hard Su Luo tried, she could not pry apart his hand. On the contrary, because of Su Luo's stubborn resistance, Nangong Liuyan's strong and powerful 5 fingers were like an iron hook. The more she struggled, the tighter it became. It got so tight that it could almost cut off Su Luo's neck. Her throat continued to ache as if it was burning. She couldn't breathe in fresh air, and her entire face swelled, turning red. She painfully gasped for breath, but could not inhale even a thread of air. It was completely cut off by Nangong Liuyan's pair of large hands. Her consciousness became more and more fuzzy. Su Luo felt that her entire body was light as a feather, floating to and fro as if her soul was about to fly away. Just when Su Luo's vision became fuzzy, a thick shadow leaned over and bent down. With an unparalleled gesture, he strongly and overbearingly occupied her red lips. A mouthful of fresh air, like strands of silk, slid into her suffocated lungs. The delirious Su Luo clutched at the final straw that could save her life. Why would she be willing to let go? He strongly, wantonly moved around in her mouth. She indifferently replenished the air essential for her survival from his mouth. She allowed him to come and go freely. No matter what, she could not oppose him. The two of them hugged tightly close together, each taking what he or she needed. It was only after a long time did that pair of large, lanky hands tightly pinching at her throat finally start to shift away. Only, his expression was still as bloodthirsty as before. It was merciless and icy cold to the bone. Luo, be obedient from now on. You mustn't be this naughty again. Nangong Liuyan slowly caressed Su Luo's red, swelling lips that had been sucked on. The corner of his mouth, little by little, hooked into a devilishly charming and alluring smile. However, that smile never reached his eyes. His eyes were as ice-cold as before, so inhumane. This man was simply too terrible. Chapter 269. Romance in Prince Jin's Manor. 5. Su Luo, with trepidation and lingering fear, looked at this man, and unable to suppress it, she took a step back. This step was like stepping away from the abyss. The smile at the corner of Nangong Liuyan's mouth became increasingly gorgeous. He caressed Su Luo's pair of pink tender cheeks, as if explaining something for Su Luo to listen to, but also seemed to be speaking to himself. If I snap off the wings of a phoenix, would it still be a phoenix? His voice was like a breeze in gentle rain, playing down everything. However, when it reached Su Luo's ears, she felt fearful and alarmed in the face of disaster. She would rather see him vent in violent fury and use a murderous gaze full of ice to look at her than see him like this with a smiling expression that never reached his eyes, trying to fool himself with words. This kind of him made her alarmed and scared. She cannot provoke him further, she really must not. Su Luo silently looked at him, not saying a word. Nangong Liuyan smiled. His smile was as tender and gentle as water. He briskly pulled on Su Luo's hand, leading her to walk towards the bed. He lovingly and indulgently rubbed the black hair on her head. The time is late, Luo girl. You should keep this king company in the same bed. After saying this, he didn't allow her to refuse and put her on top of the bed. Soon after, he turned himself over and also got onto the bed. His movements were gentle, but also carried a strong force that would not tolerate resistance. Su Luo attempted to refuse, but discovered she was simply unable to decline. This temperamental man with huge mood swings. Just a moment ago, he was violently raging, as if he wanted to kill everyone in the entire world. Now his expression was once again all smiles. She really didn't know which was the real him. Su Luo's heart let out a sigh of aggravation. Since she was unable to refuse, then she had no other choice but to accept. After all, it was not like anything would really happen in bed. It was merely sleeping on the same bed, and nothing more. Su Luo simply lay flat on top of the embroidered quilt. Afterwards, she rolled around and wrapped herself in the quilt like a plump cocooned silkworm. Then she rolled on the bed towards the wall and inclined towards the side. She faced inside, with her body stretched out straight. Su Luo's actions were done smoothly, without a half-second pause. In a blink of an eye, she had completed her movements. Nangong Liuyan was simply dumbstruck as he watched this scene in front of him. A long time later, he finally leaned over her body and started to chuckle. The more he chucked, the less he was able to repress his laughter. Finally, he was laughing so hard that tears almost came out. His little Luo was simply too cute. She would go as far as bundling herself up to resemble a cocoon silkworm. Su Luo irritatedly rolled to a 90-degree angle to be face to face with him as she glared at him. The night is getting darker. Why haven't you quickly lie down to sleep? What are you laughing at? However, since Nangong Liuyan could laugh out loud, Su Luo's could relax her highly alerted heart from before. Compared to the sinister Nangong Liuyan from just a moment ago, who was like an Azura that had walked out of hell, the him right now, although he was abominable, seemed much cuter. Nangong Liuyan spoilingly and lovingly rubbed her little head. His tone appeared to be careless. Little girl, you think that being bundled like this, then this king would be unable to deal with you? If he really wanted to deal with her, why would he regard this very small embroidered quilt as a hindrance? In the time it took him to lift his hand, he would have torn it. Su Luo's heart went thump. She became somewhat afraid of the consequences. She shakingly and falteringly extended out her little head and sent a quick glare at Nangong Liuyan. This asshole wouldn't really want to do something, right? Probably because there was something in her expression. Or it could have been that the manner she extended out her head was too ridiculous. The laughter in Nangong Liuyan's eyes became even stronger. He stretched out his hand. Those slender fingers flicked once on top of her head. Both of Su Luo's hands were wrapped in the quilt, and could not rub her head that hurt from his flick that could explode a chestnut. She could only use her watery eyes to glare at him accusingly. The high and mighty prince unexpectedly would be this stingy? Didn't I only use one of your quilts? Way too stingy. This girl's ability to avoid the important details and dwell on the minor ones was really not a little skilled. Nangong Liuyan took pity on her, and his slender fingers rubbed her forehead. His finger seized the opportunity to lightly brush her lips. Su Luo was stumped for words. Chapter 270. Romance in Prince Jin's Manor 6. His finger was warm and soft as jade. It lightly brushed by like a feather. It was numbing and tingling, making her itch from the soles of her feet to her heart. Nangong Luyan saw her reaction, and the smile in his eyes became even more concentrated. He lowered his head, with his lips almost touching hers. Su Luo wanted to move back, but discovered to her sorrow that her entire body was bundled in the quilt, unable to move. The hot air that Nangong Luyan breathed out landed onto her face, almost as if it was touching her lips. He said in a low voice, "A dead duck's mouth is hard here apart from this king. No one had ever touched it before." Ultimately, he still lightly pecked at Su Luo's soft red lips. Once again he took advantage of her. Su Luo glowered at him. Nangong Luyan raised an eyebrow in a philander manner. "Just this, and you are impatient? Now, it is still the prelude tonight. The night is very long." While pinching both of Su Luo's pink tender cheeks, his smile became even wider. Although his tone seemed careless, the idea it conveyed was nakedly dripping with blood. Hearing this, Su Luo only felt her hair stand on ends, with her back going cold. This man with evil taste. He would torment her in this way, and had actually told her that this was merely a prelude and nothing more. Nothing more. Then what would follow this? Su Luo wished that tonight would be over in a hurry, so change would come with breakfast in the daytime. Just as the saying went, whatever you owe, you must not owe a debt for a favor, because this demanded repayment in flesh. No wonder when the servants in Prince Jin's manor saw him, it was as if every one of them had seen a ghost. They were so afraid that they were terrified. They were not only afraid of him, but also of his influence and strength, right? This man, by birth alone, had the capital to make people despair and become panic-stricken. Tonight, what would he do? Instinctively, Su Luo was a little scared. She wanted to turn around and shrink back into her quilt, like a turtle withdrawing back into its shell. However, Nangong Luyan was a step ahead of her. She also didn't know how he moved. He merely grabbed the corner of the quilt firmly and casually tugged. Then Su Luo's entire body was like a meatball, automatically rolling into his embrace. Without waiting for Su Luo to turn and leave, Nangong Luyan had already lowered his body and seized her lips. His breath assaulted her senses like a dense mist around her, teasing her heart. Once Su Luo became aware, she used all her strength to push him away. What she never expected was that this push actually made him reel away. When did Nangong Luyan become this weak? The sound of thunder erupted outside the window. Pea-sized droplets of rain came down in buckets. The sound of pouring rain echoed violently during this period. Lightning flashed, thunder rolled, and the rumbling sounds were never-ending. The lightning that flashed by in an instant lit up the room like daytime. It shone upon Nangong Luyan's face, and Su Luo saw that his eyebrows and forehead were slightly knotted. Su Luo watched him, thought about it, and her entire body curled back into the embroidered quilt. She withdrew her entire body into the quilt, only leaving her pair of clear, black and large eyes unblinkingly watching Nangong Luyan. This asshole cared most about his reputation, having been pushed away by her like this. Perhaps he would fly into a rage out of humiliation? Yet, outside Su Luo's expectations, Nangong Luyan not only didn't once again ruthlessly pounce on her, he slowly turned over, and instead half reclined down on the side. He pulled up the quilt to cover himself with both hands behind his back, and lazily cast her a quick glance. "Do you feel that you could escape me tonight?" Su Luo pursed her lips, as if thinking about it while looking at him. Something was wrong. This asshole had always been the action type. Actions were more powerful than words. At this moment, he was actually speaking arrogantly. Although actions-wise he had clearly already given up. What was going on? Su Luo, who examined things down to the smallest details, could make out something doubtful at once. When the lightning flashed by, Su Luo's gaze was looking at Nangong Luyan's complexion. She clearly saw that Nangong Luyan's brows were wrinkled ferociously, appearing as if he was suffering a lot of pain. But he hasn't been injured. Su Luo secretly felt this was strange in her heart. Chapter 271. Romance in Prince Jin's Manor 7. Nangong Luyan saw Su Luo looking at him. Lifting his eyebrows, he devilishly charmingly smirked at her. He lazily said. Want the woman to take the lead? Okay, this king will give you a chance, come. Shameless. A man without boundaries. Would not taking advantage of her when speaking kill him? Su Luo fiercely glared at him. But the Nangong Luyan right now suddenly blinked his eyes. His forehead was coated in a layer sweat. Nangong, are you? Su Luo felt that something was fishy. She unrolled the quilt and shifted towards where Nangong Luyan was. Nangong Luyan waved his hand, and his smile widened. He downplayed everything, saying, It's nothing, just a little old illness. Once it's here, it will be sore for a short while. Old illness? Making Nangong Luyan call it an old illness. What kind of old wound would it be? When the time comes it would hurt for a while. When the time comes, don't tell me. After a period of time, it would start hurting. Something that comes chronically. A touch of doting feeling flashed through Su Luo's heart. She could not imagine the kind of pain that could change Nangong Luyan's complexion. How painful must it be momentarily? She was at a complete loss. She wasn't sure what she should do that would be good. Nangong Luyan was on his side, being supported on one hand. He smilingly watched her. However, Su Luo could clearly see the cold sweat on his forehead rushing out to form droplets. His chest and back were both soaked through with cold sweat. He smiled just like in the past, but the smile felt kind of lifeless. Su Luo wanted to ask him if he had painkiller drugs or something similar. But on second thought, even with Nangong Luyan's strength, if he was still unable to restrain the pain, then what was the use of painkillers? Nangong Luyan suddenly shut his eyes. He turned around and pulled the quilt to cover himself. Enough, it's getting late. If you don't want to sleep here, then go out and look for Ling Feng. He will arrange everything well for you. His tone sounded somewhat rushed, as if enduring something silently. He used the quilt to cover his entire person, so his voice sounded muffled. Su Luo was unable to see his expression clearly, but seeing his curled-up body, with his back arched and the quilt appearing to be shaking, it seemed as if it was very painful. Su Luo had a distracted and amazed expression. Her heart had a fit of unrest. In the end, what was wrong with Nangong Luyan? Such a strong, overbearing and insufferably arrogant man. How could he suffer so much pain until he was like this? Moreover, seeing him like this, it was as if this old illness had always caused him complications flaring up periodically. Su Luo hadn't left since the beginning. She sat up with both hands linked together, holding her knees. Her face was slanted, and was watching Nangong Luyan all along. Nangong Luyan sank into a deep sleep. The quilt that covered his face slid to the side. It revealed that handsome, sweat-covered pale face. Outside, the gale storm erupted. In this kind of weather, if the sweat was not wiped dry, it was very easy to catch a cold. Su Luo thought about it, climbed down the bed, and walked out quietly on tiptoe. Outside the door, there was always servants standing there waiting. Under Su Luo's instructions, a basin of hot water was very quickly fetched, in addition to a folded snow-white embroidered towel. It will be fine, I will go in by myself. You people continue to keep watch here. With one short sentence, Su Luo dismissed the servants. She personally carried the basin of hot water into the room. Nangong Luyan, this kind of strong-minded man, certainly wouldn't want others to see this weak side of himself. Su Luo set the jade basin on top of the table, wrung the towel dry, and gently wiped clean Nangong Luyan's face that was covered in sweat. Nangong Luyan's brows were pinched tightly, and his complexion was terrifyingly pale. Even though before, she was itching to swat him dead, now seeing him like this, a trace of care and concern streaked across Su Luo's heart. Her finger involuntarily stroked his face, gently sliding towards the space between his eyebrows. He seemed to have relaxed a little, doing something within her abilities for him. Su Luo felt very happy. Chapter 272. Romance in Prince Jin's Manor, 8. However, there wasn't enough time for her to be happy before her hands were grabbed by the him, who was sleeping. He pulled her to him. Even though he was still in pain and still fast asleep, his strength was as astonishingly great as before. Su Luo simply had no time to react, before her entire body had already fallen into his embrace. She was heavily pressed on top of his body, Nangong Luyan gave a muffled groan as she knocked into him, but he once again firmly hugged her to him. He then turned over and went back into a deep sleep. This time, Nangong Luyan merely hugged her, holding her close, and didn't make any other movements. His arms were strong and powerful, as hard as iron clamps. Several times, Su Luo wanted to pry open his fingers, but her efforts were to no avail. She was completely unable to move him, even the slightest bit. Nangong Luyan seemed to be submerged in a deep sleep. His breathing was long and continuous. Only his eyebrows were still slightly pinched. Su Luo stopped struggling. A trace of a tender sentiment that she herself wasn't aware of flashed through the gaze she used to look at him. This man, suffering so much pain like this and still being able to sleep, was very rare. How could she have the heart to startle him awake with noise? Su Luo pulled up the quilt and wrapped it around him completely. Afterwards, in his embrace, she found a comfortable position and raised her head to look at his face. Long, thick eyelashes, handsome straight nose, thin red lips, and his facial features were exquisite. He was like a masterpiece sculpture delicately carved by a grandmaster-level sculptor. He was so handsome it was beyond compare. Even though he was asleep as before, it was peaceful one now. His forehead successfully nodded into the Chinese character for river. Recalling his incomparable strength, eminence, and unapproachable identity and status, the place nearest to Su Luo's heart would flash with a trace of cherishing affection. Suddenly, a divine light flashed through Su Luo's mind. She suddenly remembered that she had forgotten a very important thing. Still remember that time when the little divine dragon looked at her, not wanting to let go, and was innocently deceived by her to be by her side? That's right, the celestial spirit water. Since the celestial spirit water had such a huge attractiveness for the little divine dragon, then it was sufficient to illustrate that top-of-the-line treasure. Only, she didn't know if it would be helpful in treating Nangong Luyan's pain. However, his situation couldn't be worse than what it was right now. Su Luo took out a very small cup of celestial spirit water from her space. She held it very carefully, then she whispered in a very, very soft voice, "Nangong, wake up." "Ah." Nangong Luyan hugged her tightly, sleepily letting out a sound of agreement. Su Luo once again very, very carefully pushed him. "Come, drink a little water. Maybe it will make you a little more comfortable." Nangong Luyan, in a state of half asleep and half awake, cutely and obediently opened his mouth. Su Luo carefully fed him half of the little cup of celestial spirit water for him to drink. Su Luo didn't dare to give him too much at once. She was afraid something would go wrong. After drinking all the water, Nangong Luyan once again went back into deep sleep. Only he was still hugging Su Luo as before, not letting go. Su Luo used her sleeves to gently wipe away the water stain at the corner of his mouth a few times. Again, she carefully observed his complexion. Didn't know how much time had passed, but his pinched eyebrows finally started to smooth out. Suddenly, his expression didn't seem to be in that much pain anymore. Seeing this, Su Luo was very happy. She single-handedly supported her chin, and was all smiles as she looked at him. Outside, the rain came down increasingly heavier. The thunder rumbled continuously. In this man's embrace, Su Luo unconsciously fell into a deep sleep. This sleep Su Luo slept very heavily. By the time she woke up, it was already late morning. Opening her eyes, she calmly looked at the ceiling. Last night's memories rose like the tide and rushed out. Nangong's teasing, Nangong's fury, Nangong's pain. One scene after another came thick and fast, stuffing her sober head full almost to the point of bursting. The last memory was of his smoothed-out handsome face. Su Luo suddenly sat up. When she turned her head to look, the bed already didn't have that man's silhouette. Chapter 273. Romance in Prince Jin's Manor, 9. This man was born into high status, and his martial arts cultivation was unparalleled. His power almost overflowed into the heavens, while his entire body was an enigma. This made people puzzled, and also gave birth to a sense of curiosity in their hearts. Su Luo stretched lazily. She dilly-dallied for a good while before getting up to leave the bed. She asked a servant, and found out Nangong Luyan had indeed left very early this morning. He had only made it clear that she should obediently stay inside the manor. He had left first thing in the morning? Don't know if his body was still in pain or not, Su Luo thought while eating breakfast. After finishing breakfast, Ling Feng automatically appeared in front of her. Ling Feng saw Su Luo, his mouth lifted a little. He shot her a glance that was neither cold nor hot. He held his sword and silently stood at the side. Ling Feng never expected that the boy servant from yesterday, after washing clean, was actually Su Luo. Now he was somewhat speechlessly looking at the sky. He was just saying that that secretive little boy servant was giving him an odd feeling. So as it turned out, his gut feeling wasn't mistaken. Where did Nangong go? When will he return? Su Luo turned sideways while walking to ask Ling Feng. His Highness's whereabouts have always been kept secret. It's better that Miss Su doesn't ask. Even asking was a waste of time. The normally indifferent Ling Feng added this sentence in his heart. Su Luo was just about to roll her eyes when Ling Feng once again added another sentence in a timely manner. His Highness said, "If the fourth Miss Su woke up in the morning and missed him urgently, might as well take her to the Western Grove courtyard to sit around a while. That courtyard has His Highness's portraits." A breath was stifled in Su Luo's throat. This Nangong Luyan, who missed him? She was merely asking casually without thinking about it. Su Luo unhappily glared at Ling Feng. Such a conceited and arrogant guy. He really think he is a peacock, spreading his tail, bewitching everyone. And also to miss him urgently. I truly have nothing to say to that, not going. Ling Feng's mouth rose a little. In the end he did not respond. Able to assess His Highness this way without endangering their life. There was only this person in front of his eyes that didn't even know or appreciated it. The fourth Miss Su. Ling Feng's expression remained unperturbed. Since Miss Su won't go to the study, then you should deal with these account books. Ling Feng waved his hand. Immediately, a row of servants approached in a line. Every one of them had both hands holding very thick accounting books that were piled up so high, it was blocking their line of sight. Their footsteps were shaky and swaying. It looked as if it was very dangerous. Su Luo looked at those account books, then lifted her eyes to look at Ling Feng with suspicion, opened her mouth and stammered. What do you mean deal with these account books? Speak human language. Both of Ling Feng's hand was holding onto his sword. His indifferent face was calm as he de-emphasized what he said. His Highness made clear. These things are all matters his future princess must do. Since you now have nothing to do, then just deal with all of this. Su Luo smiled a smile that was not quite a smile, and while casting him a glance, she unhurriedly said, You also said that these things are matters the future princess must handle. Why should this miss look after it? I'm not going to meddle in affairs that are not part of my position. Ling Feng's face that always seemed to have nerve paralysis was now hooked into a rare, faint smile. Towards the servants holding the accounts books swaying left and right, he coldly snorted, saying, Before His Highness left, what he instructed, do you still remember? A row of 6 servants all said in unison. We remember His Highness said that Miss Su is already His Highness's woman. She is the future Princess Jean. Her position is guaranteed, and should get sincere treatment in this house. Ling Feng satisfiedly nodded his head. His gaze landed on Su Luo's face, light as a feather. He merely raised an eyebrow, and did not speak. A breath seemed to be stifled in Su Luo's chest. That guy who ruined her reputation. Why say she was already his woman? Clearly they hadn't done anything okay. Fancy that last night. She was still worried about his illness. So extremely worried that even in the middle of the night, she still couldn't sleep. Later, she even took out celestial spirit water for him to drink. Was this how he repaid her? Chapter 274. Romance in Prince Jin's Manor 10. Princess, these account books. There were many account books. It was very heavy, and the 6 servants carrying them were panting. Their hands and foot swung to and fro, but without Su Luo's orders, they simply wouldn't dare to put down these account books. Su Luo snorted heavily. What princess? Don't just shout out something erroneously. Don't you know it will ruin a person's innocence? Yes, without His Highness's command, we wouldn't dare to call out inappropriate names. The 6 servants replied in unison. However, Imperial Concubine Princess, these account books. Su Luo simply had nothing more to say. They had just agreed to not shout out titles erroneously. What did these mouths call her again? Move all of these account books out. Who likes to look at them? Then let them look at it. In any case, I won't look at them. Su Luo impatiently waved her hand. It was not like she was Princess Jean. Why should she become a stand-in and help him take care of the miscellaneous stuff in the manor? The 6 servants' gaze simultaneously looked at Ling Feng. Ling Feng waved his hand, indicating that they should leave. The 6 servants uniformly bowed and said to Su Luo in unison, "We solemnly comply with Princess's orders." Us servants asked to be excused. Su Luo was about to scowl at them. Without waiting for her to flare up, the 6 servants, carrying the account books which were half a person in height, quickly slipped away. Where was that trembling and swaying that they had before? A feeling as if they were frail and about to fall over any second. Su Luo inevitably was dumbfounded. This Prince Jin's royal manor. Every single one of the servants all had practiced the martial arts move Ling Bo Weibu, right? How could their kung fu skill at running for their life be this powerful? Princess! Ling Feng said one sentence, and was interrupted by Su Luo's wave of a hand. Su Luo snappily glared at him. What? Even you have come to make fun of me? Wouldn't dare. Even though Ling Feng claimed that he wouldn't dare, his indifferent expression still didn't have a trace of humility that a bodyguard ought to have. Su Luo's eyebrow rose slightly. She smiled faintly while casting Ling Feng a quick glance. She calmly said with a slight anticipation, "That's right, Ling Feng. Do you still remember the last time we made a bet?" She did not believe that even this wouldn't scare Ling Feng into leaving. Sure enough, Ling Feng's expression immediately changed. He anxiously looked at Su Luo saying, "The 4th Miss Su should play nicely in this manner." All of a sudden, I remembered before His Highness left, he had instructed me to handle a few things that were urgent. Thus, I asked to be excused first. Hey, the last time's bet was about. Su Luo hadn't finished speaking before Ling Feng's figure had already disappeared from inside the room. His speed was as fast as lightning, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Seeing Ling Feng's scared and anxious rear view fleeing, Su Luo let out a sound of laughter. Last time, because they had urgently needed green-colored crystal stones to save Nangong Luyan. In a moment of desperation, Ling Feng had made a bet with Su Luo. If she could collect all 50 or equivalent green-colored crystal stones, then Ling Feng would go and become her personal bodyguard. The result was that she naturally won the bet. However, Ling Feng, this asshole, seemed as if he had completely forgotten about this bet. His face was as taut as before and continued to ignore paying this bet, coming and going freely. The people inside the room had all fled, leaving only Su Luo behind by herself. Here was the inside of Nangong Luyan's study. Normally, other people were not allowed to enter. Only Su Luo was not subjected to this restriction. On top of the bookshelf were rows and rows of books. Su Luo, who was deeply bored, picked up a book in passing. She swept a glance at the cover, and it was actually Elementary Apothecary book. In a split second, Su Luo's eyes suddenly shone brightly. She still remembered that before, inside Elder Zihua's cave dwelling, she obtained that book that all the apothecaries in the world dreamed of finding, the obscure pill recipes. That obscure pill recipes was Elder Zihua's personal work. It recorded his lifetime's knowledge and experience in refining pills from recipes. Inside, it also contained an appendix with primeval pill recipes that had already been lost in this era. It was a pity that although obscure pill recipes was great, yet, it ended up in Su Luo's hands. During that time, Elder Zihua was the continent's only Grandmaster-level apothecary. His level was so high that people could only look up with admiration, worship and deep reverence, making it hard for people to forget this predecessor. Chapter 275. Romance in Prince Jin's Manor 11. The obscure pill recipes left by Elder Zihua included his lifetime worth of studies, but because he was too great, it was to the extent that the book he left behind was very abstruse. At the very least, she needed to be an intermediate apothecary to be able to understand a little of what was written. Not to mention, Su Luo was a novice who hadn't even set foot into the threshold of an apothecary. Her right now possessed a mountain of treasures, but no matter what, she couldn't find the key to enter it. This kind of taste, like that of a castle in the air, was really difficult to bear. However, now this elementary apothecary book, right in front of her, just so happened to be able to resolve the predicament that Su Luo was faced with. Recalling Nangong Luyan suffering from that kind of pain last night, Su Luo's heart suddenly had a notion. If she could raise her apothecary level, maybe she could cure Nangong Luyan's old illness. Having thought of things up to here, Su Luo, with single-minded devotion, started to thumb through that elementary apothecary book. This type of basic book paid more attention to explaining the theory and analyzing the apothecary system. Su Luo had always been smart with practically a photographic memory, and adding her single-minded devotion on top of that, time passed in a flash while she was studying. When Su Luo rubbed her tired and dry eyes while standing up to stretch, she discovered a man was standing at the doorway. Today's Nangong Luyan was dressed in a black brocade robe. His figure was tall and lean. His phoenix eyes were narrowed slightly, dark as ink and deep as a bottomless pool. It was domineering, and at the same time full of a noble aura. His thin lips were dark red, moist and hooked into a demonically charming smile, like a scarlet cluster of amaryllis, so alluring and enticing. He stood unmoving at the doorway. The sunlight shone onto his whole body, making it radiate a faint halo. Even though he was just silently watching her, part of his inherent arrogance, nobility and domineering aura basically made it impossible for people to ignore his existence. He merely watched Su Luo with an amiable manner that was light as clouds and gentle as the wind. However, he still gave off a kind of indiscernible oppressive feeling. Encountering that pair of charming, beautiful eyes that hypnotized all living things, Su Luo found that her own heart was throbbing uncontrollably. Evildoer. He indeed deserved to be called an evildoer. Just by appearing, he would capture all the brilliance from the surroundings, as if all the splendor would gather on his body at this time. Nangong Luyan, dressed in an elegant black-colored brocade robe, slowly walked towards Su Luo. Finally, his tall body stopped in front of Su Luo. A devilish radiance started to float to the surface of his beautiful pair of eyes. With a dazzlingly beautiful and devilishly charming manner, he unmovingly stared at Su Luo. From the beginning, the corner of his mouth had a wicked smile. Looking until you are struck dumb? You like the king this much? Su Luo suddenly returned to her senses and irritatedly rolled her eyes. What rubbish are you saying? Who likes you? Would this guy die if he didn't make fun of her? Every time it was the same trick. Nangong Luyan smiled shallowly. His gaze cast a look at the book in her hand. Elementary apothecary book? That's right. Our family's Luo girl indeed has the figure of a gifted apothecary. Not cultivating it would be a pity. Speaking of this, Su Luo's heart suddenly moved. She quietly stared at Nangong Luyan, then with a clear and cold voice said, "What's the matter with you last night? Old illness. Is it very serious?" Nangong Luyan's long arm, in one move, encircled Su Luo to his chest. He lowered his head and smilingly looked at her. Is this king's little Luo concerned? Am I right? Su Luo turned her face away and muttered, "Who's concerned? It was only because previously, I didn't know and was suddenly scared by your illness. Why don't you tell me what's it all about in the end? Aren't you Prince Jean? Couldn't you find an apothecary to treat you?" Nangong Luyan's lips were pursed while he smilingly looked at Su Luo. Strands of bright and beautiful sunlight landed on his bright eyes, like the light and shadows now flowing smoothly. It was resplendent and gorgeous. Speak, what are you looking at? Su Luo annoyedly pushed at his strong as iron body. Chapter 276, Elementary Apothecary 1. Nangong Luyan smiled until sound came out. Hard-mouthed girl, still saying you don't care about this king. Look at you being so anxious. You just said a bunch of words. And normally, when this king wants to talk to you, it's difficult. Su Luo also realized that she was actually anxious on his behalf. A blush from shame flashed across her face. She feigned calmness and slanted her head away, pretending as if she hadn't heard a thing. Nangong Luyan loved this kind of bashfulness of hers to death. His expression was like the cherry blossoms in March, splendid and bright, as he deeply and charmingly looked at her. The corner of his mouth contained a light smiling expression. His Luo girl was just this stubborn and cute. Truly, he liked her more and more. Both figures were nestled up against each other, standing quietly, and time seemed to have stood still. Time was good and still life was peaceful. This kind of ambiguous scene, it appeared as if between them, there was really some kind of relationship. A frenetic feeling flashed through Su Luo's heart. She unconsciously pushed away Nangong Luoyan. Her gaze landed on the elementary apothecary book on the ground. Her eyes moved slightly, and decided to divert Nangong Luoyan's attention. Nangong Luoyan, your illness really can't be treated? Su Luo softly asked. Nangong Luoyan looked at her deeply and charmingly, understatedly saying, "It's not something that can't be treated, only these charlatans are too useless. My family's little Luo Luo, on the other hand, is determined to treat the old illness of this king's? Stop rambling on incoherently. What level of apothecary is needed to cure you?" Su Luo knew he usually wasn't serious, even when talking about an old illness. He was still smiling like before, light as a cloud and gentle as wind. This should be at least a grandmaster's level, Nangong Luoyan said somewhat uncertainly. Grandmaster level? Su Luo suddenly had a feeling of looking up at a high mountain. It was important to know that apothecary levels were divided into elementary apothecary, intermediate apothecary, advanced apothecary, elite apothecary, master apothecary, and then after, was finally Grandmaster Apothecary 1. Apothecary levels were very strict. Every promotion to the next grade was extremely difficult. Now, she still hadn't even felt her way to the doorway of an apothecary. Wanting her to rise to the Grandmaster level apothecary. Oh heavens, in contrast being hacked by lightning seemed simpler. Nangong Luoyan also clearly didn't seem to place his hope on Su Luo's body. However, he merely wrapped himself around her and resolutely handed over the responsibility to her. Yes, Grandmaster Apothecary, this king's Luo girl must strive very hard. You must strive to cure this king's illness earlier. Speaking of which, every month, it flares up once to torture me. This king is quite impatient. Su Luo was simply speechless. It's better that your hope is not placed on me. The me in this lifetime might not be able to reach that height. You must know on this entire continent, during that time, there was only Elder Zi Hua, who was promoted to the Grandmaster level of apothecary. Even though she obtained this renowned elder's legacy, yet how far she could walk on this path, she really didn't know. That won't do, you must cure this king. Nangong Luoyan nevertheless pig-headedly insisted on relying on Su Luo no matter what. Besides you, this king will not allow anyone else to treat it. I will just wait for you. Luo girl, for the purpose of curing this king, you must try very hard to raise your level as an apothecary. How could there be this kind of headstrong person? Though granted, even if he was picky about the doctor when seeking medical help, it was okay. But he had actually picked her, who was now still a zero-level damn rookie. He really indeed did add a huge pressure on her. You are not allowed to be this unruly. Su Luo unhappily glared at him. This man in front of others was powerful and unparalleled. However, in front of her, he was like an unruly child that made trouble without reason, making her feel even more speechless. Nangong Luoyan's red lips were grumbling. His bright and intelligent, large eyes pitifully and accusingly watched her. Su Luo was simply about to be defeated by Nangong Luoyan being like this. Chapter 277 Elementary Apothecary 2. Okay. I promise you I will study hard to be an apothecary. However, you should also promise me, if in the future you come across a Grandmaster Apothecary, you are not allowed to refuse treatment from them. Su Luo had no choice but to agree to his demand. Nangong Luoyan wickedly and unscrupulously blinked his eyes, mumbling a sentence to himself. If this king was to walk in a roundabout route, then how could I run into one? What did you say? His voice was very soft. Su Luo couldn't hear it clearly. Luo's thoughts are for the sake of this king. This king's heart is very comforted. You should rest assured that this king will certainly marry you and take you as wife. I will save the position of main wife Princess Jean for you, Nangong Luyan said in high spirits. Once he said this, Su Luo at once recalled the manor's servant's actions earlier today. If it weren't for the evildoer in front of her secretly issuing commands, then how could those servants dare to address her with that title? The position of Princess Jean, humph, you should keep it. This young lady is not interested. But this king wants only you to take that position. Nangong Liuyun's eyes showed dense tender feelings. He grabbed hold of and pulled Su Luo, who was turning and just about to leave, to a stop. His face that charmed all living things had an unprecedentedly serious, earnest stare. The position of Princess Jean, apart from you, will eternally not be filled by another person. Then, what about the Jade Lakes Fairy? This sentence was almost blurted out by Su Luo. However, in the end, she stiffly restrained herself. The Jade Lakes Fairy. This was an eternal taboo between them that would not let her be at peace and even-tempered. Often, when she was touched by his dedication to her, that incomparably beautiful face would always emerge in her head. That extraordinary and refined fairy, who was above the common populace. This was a thorn in her heart. It normally didn't hurt nor itch until at a critical time. Then it would make the heart sore. Su Luo quietly and unmovingly gazed at Nangong Luyan. Finally, she turned her head away. That name, she never wanted to say it again. If one day in the future, she didn't need to say it and Nangong Luyan would automatically stand by her side defending her, protecting her. In that case, maybe she really would give her heart to him, and together with him, build the river of love. Together in this different world, hand in hand, they would conquer a slice of bright heaven for themselves. Now, she must not give him any promises, because she was afraid of being hurt again. In her previous life, being stupid once was enough. In this world, she must live for herself and to live marvelously well. Nangong Luyan was very intelligent. How could he not understand what Su Luo wanted to say, but once again didn't say? However, the him right now could not say anything. He silently looked out the window, slowly releasing a deep breath. An understanding but lonely smile flashed on Su Luo's face. The atmosphere inside the room was now somewhat heavy and dense. Nangong Luyan suddenly let out a sigh and heavily rubbed Su Luo's head. Doesn't Luo girl want to practice to become an apothecary? Come, this king will take you for a stroll around the medicine garden. If there are medicinal herbs that you need, we will pick it from there. Medicine garden? Su Luo curiously looked at him. You actually have a medicine garden? Nangong Luyan noncommittally smiled with a should-be-expected manner, as he led Su Luo by hand and walked out. Along the way, they came across the manor's servants. Each and every one of them had seen His Highness Prince Jean from a distance away, so they had already moved to the curbside, bowing while waiting. Yesterday, those that had waited upon them in the dining room were merely a small number of people. As a result, today they actually saw with their own eyes their family's azure-like, deeply cold highness, unexpectedly acting like a child. He was in an exuberant mood while leading along a young lady, holding her hand. For a moment, there were people dropping plates, walking and twisting their ankles, spraining their necks. And the greatest number of people were the ones whose chins dropped to the ground. Su Luo was somewhat embarrassed, and she wanted to shake off Nangong Luyan. However, Nangong Luyan's hand, which seemed as if it was lightly holding hers, his wrist was in fact as hard as an iron clamp. No matter what Su Luo did, she was unable to throw him off. Chapter 278, Elementary Apothecary 3. Nangong Luyan acted as if nobody else was present, ignoring all kinds of people. In high spirits, he led Su Luo along, and on the way, showed her off as he passed. Su Luo plaintively complained in her heart. She was done for. If this was to spread out, did she still have a reputation to keep? Prince Jin's royal manor was very large. The courtyards were arranged irregularly, resulting in a charming effect. Didn't know how long they walked for. Eventually, Nangong Luyan brought Su Luo to a garden that was overflowing with the aroma of medicinal herbs. When Su Luo went inside this medicine garden and saw the scenery in front of her, it immediately made her eyes shine brightly. Su Luo identified everything one by one, and found that the medicinal herbs in this medicine garden was complete. All the medicinal herbs mentioned in that elementary apothecary book were practically all here. In this case, it was easier to manage. It also helped her avoid going everywhere to search for these medicinal herbs. However, for her first time refining medicine, what kind of medicinal pill would be good to refine? Su Luo's fingers was on her chin in a pondering position. Her brain was rapidly thinking about this question. After thinking for a while, Su Luo finally decided to refine an elementary-level spirit restoration pill. Spirit restoration pill, as the name implied, was a pill that replenished a person's spirit power. A person's spirit power was limited. After a battle, it would be used up. However, if a person swallowed a spirit restoration pill on the spot, then it was possible to restore their spirit power. Elementary spirit restoration pills could only restore a person's spirit strength by 10%. Intermediate spirit restoration pills could restore a person's spirit strength by 20%, and so on. However, on this continent, there were very few apothecaries. Moreover, the success rate for refining spirit restoration pills was not very high. Therefore, the market price for elementary spirit restoration pill was still not very low. The common market price for one pill was 100 gold coins. Because Su Luo's body contained the wood element system, she naturally had a familiar feeling with regards to medicinal herbs. She closed her eyes and was able to clearly feel the distinction between the similar types of medicinal herbs. Which stock of herb was most active and strong, and which stock of herb was withered and listless. Su Luo, without the slightest hesitation, naturally picked all the vital and active herbal ingredients. In the medical garden, she harvested more than 10 types of herbal ingredients, which she needed to refine the spirit restoration pill. Su Luo threw all of the herbal ingredients into her space at once. Nangong Luyan had already guessed that Su Luo was able to unlock her space. Now seeing this as expected, she really did unlock it. Since she was able to use her space in front of him, it was sufficient to prove her trust in him. Thinking up to here, a smiling expression appeared at the corner of Nangong Luyan's mouth. Luo girl, you couldn't have also already prepared the medicinal cauldron? Of course, and also to tell you the truth, my medicinal cauldron is difficult to purchase with even 10,000 gold coins. You absolutely cannot imagine how great it is. Su Luo, with a lofty and strutting manner, cast him a glance. Her medicinal cauldron was called Zihua Medicinal Cauldron, which was actually the one used by Elder Zihua back then. The success rate for refining pills was fully doubled. This was not something that those other medicinal cauldrons outside could compare to. Then this king will look forward to it, however. For the first time refining pills, it is hard to avoid failure. If so, then Luo girl must not cry and snivel. Nangong Luyan spoilingly and indulgently looked at her. As long as she was happy, no matter what she was doing, he would keep her company in the same place. He was merely afraid that she would be disappointed when she failed. Therefore Nangong Luyan warned her in advance. Cry and snivel? What kind of person did he take her for? Su Luo exasperatedly rolled her eyes at him. She will make him open his eyes wide to have a good look. She, Su Luo, not only could cultivate martial arts at an astonishing speed, but also in the way of refining, she absolutely would not lose to others. After she chased Nangong Luyan out, Su Luo closed the door and her spirit entered her space in a flash. Su Luo did it step by step according to the procedure in elementary apothecary book. First of all, step 1 required that the more than 10 types of medicinal herbs be soaked in spring water. Su Luo in her space also did not need to collect other types of water. What she had the most of in her space was celestial spirit water. Also, the celestial spirit water's usefulness had already passed one person and one divine dragon's verification. It was absolutely great. Su Luo retrieved some celestial spirit water and soaked the medicinal herbs one by one. Chapter 279, Elementary Apothecary 4. She didn't know that precisely because of this lazy action, this gave her an unexpected result. Moreover, this brought about a huge impact to her future refining career. In the process of soaking the medicinal herbs, Su Luo, with interest, sized up the Zihuo medicinal cauldron in front of her. The Zihuo medicinal cauldron was a full half a meter high. The whole cauldron appeared to be reddish-purple in color. On the medicinal cauldron were carved 4 dragon heads with their mouths wide open. The dragon heads seemed malevolent with mouths wide open, as if the flames that reached the sky were gushing out of the dragon's mouth. The 4 dragon tails were coiled together, taking the shape of an unusual-looking cauldron lid. Lifting open the cauldron lid, it was a wash-basin-sized, first-rate iron pot. This was where the medicinal herbs were to be placed, and on top of the iron pot was a piece of smooth flat divider where the medicinal pills would appear on top of it. The Zihuo medicinal cauldron could not only amplify the flame, but would also double the success rate during the refining process, because of the rare metals mixed in when creating the cauldron. Su Luo placed the pre-soaked medicinal herbs one by one into the iron pot, and used the copper lid to cover the cauldron tightly. She lightly patted the mechanism underneath the cauldron. A flame. Su Luo was indeed a fire system mage. Moreover, she could already condense out a small ball of flame by now. However, she always felt that she lacked a little something. Su Luo's round eyes cleverly turned around as she pondered. All of a sudden, Su Luo clapped her hands. She finally remembered. Got it. How could she have forgotten that treasure? The little divine dragon, The true fire he sprayed out of his mouth was much stronger compared to her own small ball of fire. The strength of his fire was stronger than hers by innumerable fold. Su Luo fished up the little divine dragon that was lying on his back on top of the source stone, with his little belly rising and falling in the midst of a deep sleep. The little divine dragon moved his little mouth and rubbed against Su Luo's chest. Both of his little paws were tightly clenching her lapel, and he once again sunk into deep slumber. He also let out a little snore. Su Luo suddenly didn't know whether to laugh or cry. However, because it was important to her cultivation, she nevertheless had to borrow a little bit of the little divine dragon's flame. Su Luo pinched the little divine dragon's nose. For a short while, it was tolerable, but after a period of several breaths, the little divine dragon started to slowly wake up. His sleepy eyes were drowsy, looking at Su Luo with a bewildered and innocent expression. Be good, don't sleep yet. First spray out a little fire for your master. Su Luo held the little divine dragon and aimed his little mouth at one of the open dragon mouths on top of the medicinal cauldron's lid. Su Luo impatiently wanted the little divine dragon to assist with the source of the fire, but wasn't aware that now, the posture of her holding 2 of the little divine dragon's legs looked like she was holding a peeing little kid. Fortunately, when the little divine dragon saw the carved large dragon design on top, his sleepy and drowsy eyes become mostly awake. In fact, Su Luo was still a little worried, because the little divine dragon, this child in the recent past, was a card that would come out and do things outside of expectations. Recalling before, in order to eliminate that pursuer following her, she took the risk and let him undertake the task. The result was that he first sprayed out water, which almost led to a huge accident. Fortunately, the second time, he accidentally sprayed out lightning that directly roasted the guy chasing her to kill her into charcoal. Su Luo warned him over and over again. Remember, you must spray out fire. Don't spray out water nor lightning. By all means, you must not spray out water. If water was to go in, then this whole thing would be ruined. Maybe it was because the gods were standing on Su Luo's side. Her luck could be considered good. What the muddle-headed little divine dragon sprayed out was fire, genuine fire. After borrowing the fire source, Su Luo allowed the little divine dragon to lie down and continue sleeping. She started to refine the pill. The true fire in Su Luo's palm, under her control, entered the wide-open dragon mouth. The temperature at the top of the medicinal cauldron gradually rose little by little. The more time passed, the more focused Su Luo's powerful mind became. This was the first time she refined a pill. Moreover, the pill being refined was also not a high-level one. However, she inevitably would have a kind of obsessive feeling. Chapter 280, Elementary Apothecary 5. Having added celestial spirit water, along with the help of the little divine dragon's true fire, then drawing support from Zihuo medicinal cauldron, If she still failed to refine the pill, even she wouldn't forgive herself. Therefore, no matter what, she didn't want failure to occur in this situation. Su Luo slightly narrowed her eyes. The spiritual force in her body started to circulate slowly. The flame in the center of her palm, under her spiritual power, blaze after blaze coiled into the medicinal cauldron. The flame inside the medicinal cauldron continuously rolled around and burned. Su Luo squinted her eyes. She very carefully and cautiously controlled the unruly flame in the Zihuo medicinal cauldron. She appeased the flame as if pacifying a naughty, unruly little fire baby. Under her placating, those flames that were scattered in all directions, and doing as they pleased, meekly gave in. They obediently and neatly arranged into one flame. She really could control the flame now. Su Luo, with a pleasantly surprised expression, looked at the center of her palm. The corner of her mouth rose, and her mood became pretty good. According to the teachings in the elementary apothecary book, people that haven't entered the doorstep of apothecary, through countless practices to shape their refining skills, that allowed them to feel the process, would gain understanding after many failures. Finally, they would be able to casually control the flame as they wished. In addition, the ability to control flames was a basic skill that an elementary apothecary needed to achieve. Yet, unexpectedly, just a moment ago during her first experiment, she actually was able to learn how to control the flame. This would mean that she had now already felt her way to the doorstep of an elementary apothecary. Su Luo was secretly delighted in her heart. However, she strictly told herself to calm down, because this was nothing more than a mere beginning. Later, there were still things that were even more difficult waiting for her to do, so she must not relax in the slightest. Slowly, Su Luo started to experience this Zihuo medicinal cauldron's merit. This Zihuo medicinal cauldron seemed as if it was very familiar with her spirit power. After her spirit power entered the cauldron, it caused an extremely small hindrance, and almost seemed not to hinder the flow. Su Luo concentrated her attention completely on controlling the flame's temperature and extracting the active ingredients from the herbs. Under Su Luo's sensing of the medicinal herbs in the Zihuo medicinal cauldron, the celestial spring water, as well as the true fire which was right in the middle of changing, this allowed a fantastical thing to occur. All kinds of different activated medicinal herbs were shaped and refined by the flame. All sorts of changes were taking place in the absolute silence. All categories of medicinal herbs' active chemicals were pressed out one by one, and like this, were assembled together. The herbs seemed to mutually exchange their essence when combining. Su Luo continuously concentrated her attention completely on extrapolating the intrinsic order of the medicinal herbs. Finally, Su Luo roughly calculated that there was as many as 100 ways to fuse these medicinal herbs. This was merely an elementary spirit restoration pill, and it would actually have so many subtle combinations. If it was later, only heaven would know how complicated it would be. Grandmaster level apothecary, it was indeed an existence that people hoped for but could not reach. Su Luo couldn't even relax for a second. Her pair of eyes were slightly closed. She condensed all of her spirit power and poured it into the medicinal cauldron. She was constantly observing the situation inside the medicinal cauldron. All of a sudden, Su Luo sensed that something was not going well, because she could sense the originally cooperative herb essences inside the medicinal cauldron. In a split second, seemed to have been startled. Each and every one of them migrated in all directions in a very frightened manner, fleeing in disarray. This simply made Su Luo wearily rush to and fro. Su Luo made herself calm down, carefully felt about and carefully appeased. She had a kind of feeling that the reason ought to be because the flame inside the medicinal cauldron was too weak. She had always respected her own intuition. Also, her intuition had never been wrong. Just in this split second, Su Luo made her choice. She reached out her hand and used all her might to slap the dragon mouth on the medicinal cauldron. Concentrating all of her spirit power, the flame in the center of her palm rushed out. The flame rapidly rushed into the middle of the medicinal cauldron. The flame inside the entire medicinal cauldron rose in a flash, and the temperature doubled. Very quickly, Su Luo felt that the spirit power in her own body was almost exhausted. Could it be that the first time she refined a pill must end up in failure? She refused to accept it. Su Luo clenched her teeth and persisted. Chapter 281, Elementary Apothecary 6. Because she was on the brink of exhausting her spirit power, her forehead was now covered with closely packed beads of sweat. Her complexion was terrifyingly pale, and both her hands that were pressed on top of the medicinal cauldron couldn't keep from trembling slightly continuously. If Nangong Luyin was here, his heart would absolutely ache for her, and would carry her away without the slightest hesitation. Because the Su Luo right now looked as if she was tottering on the verge of collapse, and in extreme pain. However, Su Luo refused to give up. She clenched her teeth, and persisted onwards as before. No matter what, she wouldn't relinquish her grip. Gradually, Su Luo was aware that she could sense something vaguely in her dazed state, just at the final moment when her spirit power was about to be exhausted. All of a sudden, Su Luo's forehead suddenly became clear, and a whiff of hot energy slowly rose from within her dantian one. It wandered in every direction within her body, and this kind of energy became hotter and hotter. A beam of light flashed through Su Luo's pair of eyes. She was very familiar with this kind of feeling. The last time when she promoted, this was how she felt. She had been hovering around the peak of the second rank for a long time. Originally, she just lacked an opportunity to advance. Could it be that refining pills was just such an opportunity? She actually guessed right. Just a moment ago, all her concentration was condensed and focused within the medicinal cauldron. She accidentally actually broke through the barrier, and in one go was promoted to the third rank. It truly was profiting from disaster. Even the heaven was unusually partial to her. In 20 short days, she started at 0, and directly advanced to the third rank. This cultivation speed, if it was to spread out, would right away scare a bunch of people to death. Su Luo restrained her excited frame of mind and calmed down. Her right now, because of being promoted to the third rank, had her spirit power completely refilled. It was also the reason why her control of the herb's nature inside the medicinal cauldron was even more adept and easy. Not long after, the corner of Su Luo's mouth finally showed a relieved, smiling expression. She knew that this first time she refined a pill, she had succeeded. Also, she faintly felt that the pleasant surprise from refining the pills this time was not limited to such a simple thing as breaking through to the third rank. After letting it cool, Su Luo slowly lifted the medicinal cauldron's lid. Immediately, a rich, sweet scent rushed towards her nose. It diffused everywhere within her space, lingering for a long time. Su Luo had knowledge about, and had come across spirit restoration pills before. At that time when she extorted medicinal pills from apothecary Lung. Among them one kind was the spirit restoration pill. She took a deep breath, and the corner of her mouth lifted into a smile of satisfaction. This was due to the fact that this kind of sweet scent smelled even richer than the spirit restoration pill apothecary Lung refined. After the smoke dispersed, Su Luo's gaze was fixed on what was inside the medicinal cauldron. With this one glance, it couldn't help but make her stare somewhat blankly. Why was there more spirit restoration pills than expected? Remembering the writings in the elementary apothecary book, it stated that when refining spirit restoration pills for the first time, to have 3 pieces of spirit restoration pills in one medicinal cauldron was already considered especially good. Most of the people with general talent could only produce 2 pills, or even just 1 pill. However, Su Luo looked upon the flat, mirror-like surface within the medicinal cauldron. On the surface lay 10 pieces of plump pills. Each and every piece was plump and glowing with health. They looked sleek and cute, making people feel very happy. She actually, in one medicinal cauldron furnace, refined 10 pieces of pills. This success rate, this refining quantity, made even Su Luo herself inevitably somewhat speechless. However, no matter what, as long as it was a good thing, then it's all right. Su Luo very satisfiedly took out a jade bottle. She very carefully collected the 10 pieces of spirit restoration pills into the jade porcelain bottle, before finally stuffing the opening close with a cork. This stored all of the sweet scent inside the jade porcelain bottle. After she had carefully put away these pills, Su Luo carried the jade porcelain bottle. Her spirit flashed out of her space and joined together into one with her body that was sleeping outside of her space. The Su Luo outside of her space faintly squinted her eyes, holding the jade porcelain bottle. She pushed open the door and went looking for Nangong Luyan. Such good news, she couldn't wait to share it with him. However, when she pushed open the door, what Nangong Luyan saw was a weeping and sobbing little face. One Dantian is an energy center on the human body important for meditation and martial arts practice. Please see Wiki for a more detailed explanation. Chapter 282, Elementary Apothecary, 7. Seeing Su Luo's pursed lips and crestfallen appearance, Nangong Luyan spoilingly and indulgently rubbed her little head. He reached out and hugged her to him consolingly saying, "The first time refining pills and succeeding, in the records of this continent, there is only Elder Zihua alone and no other. You mustn't be too broken-hearted." Su Luo became silent, as she secretly said in her heart, so as it turned out, Elder Zihua also succeeded in refining pills on his first try. No wonder the renowned elder would later be able to reach the Grandmaster level as an apothecary. However, she was also not lacking in this. She had also succeeded in her first time refining. Moreover, she was very successful. Nangong Luyan saw that Su Luo's little face was still dejected, taciturn and not speaking. He thought she was in a depressed mood, so his slender finger hooked her straight, charming and lovable nose. "If you really want to study refining pills, this king will take you to find a teacher. Guaranteed, I will have you enter the refining apothecary ranks within a month. Okay, you mustn't be angry anymore." Su Luo continued to be uncommunicative. She suddenly thought that the Nangong Luyan before her eyes was very amusing. Originally, he was aloof and removed, as if everything was within his control, never having lost control of anything. But now, he was working hard at spoilingly and indulgently trying to console her. "This is also no good? Then you speak. What do you want to do? Could it be that you will insist on this king marrying you today for you to be happy?" Nangong Luyan feigned embarrassment as he tapped her forehead. Su Luo could not hold it back anymore, uttering a laughing sound. She also very quickly turned her head away and pushed at Nangong Luyan, warning him saying, "Don't talk nonsense. Who wants to marry you? Stop being so narcissistic. Apart from little Luo Luo, this king will not marry anyone else." Nangong Luyan seized this opportune moment to express his desires. "Humph, this young lady is someone you want to marry, and so you can just marry." Su Luo tossed her chin up, letting out 2 snorts. Afterwards, a white jade bottle appeared in her hand, and she stuffed it into Nangong Luyan's hand. "What is this?" Nangong Luyan curiously examined the bottle. "Open it, take a look and you will find out." Su Luo urged him to open it without delay. Nangong Luyan suspiciously took a quick glance at Su Luo. He hesitated for a moment, before cautiously and slowly pulling out the cork from the mouth of the bottle. Immediately, a never-before-present sweet scent permeated into his nose. "Hey!" Nangong Luyan let out a sound of surprise. From the jade bottle, he poured out a few medicinal pills. Now they lay properly and unmoving in the center of his palm. His knowledge with regards to medicinal pills was stronger than Su Luo's by a lot. With only a quick glance, he was able to recognize that these were spirit restoration pills. However, after carefully sniffing and observing it, he also found that this was not merely a spirit restoration pill, because a spirit restoration pill's aroma wasn't this rich. These medicinal pills, where did they come from? Nangong Luyan had a faint trace of a guess in his heart, as a pair of beautiful eyes closely gazed at Su Luo. Su Luo smugly watched, then threw Nangong Luyan a glance. If even Nangong Luyan was this surprised, presumably other people would be even more stunned. Su Luo had both hands linked behind her back, chin raised, and her whole face had a self-satisfied expression. She turned her face away and said, "What do you think?" Even though she had turned her face away, however, the corner of her mouth was pursed in a smile. The corner of her mouth was raised in a huge arc that she was unable to cover up. Nangong Luyan's heart shook. With a gaze kind of like looking at a rare treasure, he stared at Su Luo. A bright luster floated faintly to the surface of his beautiful eyes. He took a deep breath, with both hands holding on to Su Luo's shoulder. He pulled her back to him, and their eyes met. Luo girl, tell me, was this really something you refined? Nangong Liuyun's voice had an unheard of seriousness. His pair of eyes roamed around in light and shadows. They were overflowing with light and color, resplendent like starlight. Aha, who else could it be? Su Luo, with both hands behind her back, cast quick sideways glances at Nangong Liuyun. Chapter 283, Elementary Apothecary, 8. Nangong Liuyun's appearance was always one that was in control. Seldom would his appearance change even slightly. Naturally, she must enjoy this to the fullest. She really wished she had a camera in her hand now, and could capture this second, when he appeared astonished. Then in the future, she could take it out and make fun of him. Su Luo laughingly thought of this. Nangong Liuyun unblinkingly stared at Su Luo. His pair of deep black eyes had a strong, spirited expression. His beautiful Adam's apple moved in a flash, as if he wanted to devour Su Luo and swallow her whole. Being stared at with this kind of gaze, all of a sudden, Su Luo had a kind of feeling of being stung by thorns. She let out a dry cough, casting a glance at Nangong Liuyun. Isn't it merely just a few pieces of medicinal pills? Do you need to be like this? She still hadn't told him the matter of her being promoted to the 3rd rank. If she was to say it, what kind of expression would Nangong Liuyun have? Nangong Liuyun hadn't heard what she said. The corner of his mouth was pursed slightly. Could it be that this girl didn't know that a variant medicinal pill was worth a lot more than a basic medicinal pill? Nangong Liuyun took out a single pill, and without hesitation swallowed it. He closed his phoenix eyes slightly, as he carefully sensed the release of that plentiful spirit strength. Very quickly, he opened his eyes. His phoenix eyes were stormy and full of meaning. His devilishly charming gaze was fixed on Su Luo, staring at Su Luo until her heart was somewhat anxious. Without waiting for Su Luo to ask, the clear and smooth sound of his laughter burst out, spilling from the corner of his mouth. The sound was roguish, magical and languid, as if he was in an excellent mood. Nangong Liuyun, is there a problem with this spirit restoration pill? Just a moment ago, Su Luo was still immensely proud of herself. Now she was somewhat doubtful as she looked at Nangong Liuyun. Ever since he swallowed that spirit restoration pill, he seemed a little strange. Nangong Liuyun's dark red lips hooked up. The fine ink-black hair floating on his shoulder carelessly moved with the wind. He looked extremely tempting to everyone's heart. His pair of handsome eyes was as beautiful as the stars, staring deeply at Su Luo. After a long while he sighed and sluggishly said, "Luo girl, you really are a treasure. A unique and unmatched treasure in the whole world. I, Nangong Liuyun, am very fortunate to be able to walk hand in hand with you." Some doubt flashed through Su Luo's pair of beautiful eyes. "Why are you sighing all of a sudden? Is this spirit restoration pill very strange?" Su Luo asked with some disbelief. Then she took out a spirit restoration pill and swallowed it herself. When the spirit restoration pill entered her stomach, Su Luo could distinctly detect the rapid rise of spirit power in her dantian. Now do you understand how uncommon the spirit restoration pills you refined are? Nangong Liuyun's deep black eyes were like the quiet ocean under the white clouds, tranquil and deep. They serenely gazed at Su Luo. Growth of 20% in spirit power? Su Luo said somewhat disbelievingly, even though she was a novice and illiterate with respect to refining medicines, but she also knew that elementary spirit restoration pills were only able to increase the spirit power by 10%. However, her elementary spirit restoration pills were able to increase spirit power by 20%. This clearly was no longer an elementary spirit restoration pill. Rather, it was an intermediate spirit restoration pill. This was not only a question of increasing the spirit power by 20%, but rather that she could use elementary medicinal herbs to refine an intermediate level medicinal pill. This was the real crux of the problem. In a similar fashion, didn't that mean that when she reached the elementary rank, she has the strength of an intermediate rank? When she reached the intermediate rank, she would have the strength of an advanced rank. Thinking up to here, Su Luo was simply stunned by her own brazen guess. Nangong Liyuan's mouth evoked into a devilishly flattering smile. A pair of beautiful eyes slyly smiled, looking at Su Luo. Luo girl, don't forget your promise from before. This king's old illness will depend entirely on you now. Using the old illness to hang on to her, this way, she would often think of him and worry about him. At least when she was refining pills, the first thing she would think about would be him. Nangong Liyuan's dark red lips were pearl-like, pure, sparkling and translucent. This contrast against his skin made him even more bewitchingly handsome, full of a devilish aura. Chapter 284. To come knocking for a fight. 1. Su Luo rolled her eyes towards the sky. Grandmaster-level apothecary, how many years and months must you wait? Who knows when it will be? Must I still have to see you every day until then? Humph, humph. Once Su girl gets promoted as an apothecary, she is already thinking about kicking this king to the side? Don't even think about it. Nangong Liyuan hugged her in an incorrigibly shameless manner. His entire body was leaning against hers. Su Luo was simply speechless. This man's ability to invert the truth from black to white was pretty good. She was merely a very small elementary apothecary, while he was an unparalleled 7th-ranked martial arts expert. When all's said and done, who ought to be disdainful of whom? Nangong Liyuan grabbed onto Su Luo's wrist. In the next split second, his eyes suddenly gleamed with a flash of light. Luo girl. Nangong Liyuan was almost choked by his own saliva. This evildoer of a girl. Unexpectedly, she was 3rd-ranked? How could it be possible? Su Luo saw that he already understood, and did not continue to conceal it from him. With an immensely proud of herself attitude, she cast him a quick glance. How about it? Nangong Liyuan turned his body away, inhaling a deep breath before turning back to her. His thin and large palm was placed on her head as he let out a heavy sigh. Looks like this king must go into seclusion to cultivate. He had really never seen an evildoer that was more gifted than Su Luo. How long had it been? Not more than 20 days, right? From 0 to the 3rd rank, simply a triple jump and directly taking off. Su Luo, with both arms looped before her chest, smugly raised an eyebrow. You must be convinced now. On this earth there exists a real, gifted genius. And also the real gifted geniuses were the ones exploding with luck. Nangong Liyuan speechlessly rubbed her head and urged himself on in his heart. Don't look at 7th rank as exceedingly high. But who could say accurately after 1 year if this girl would reach the 7th rank? Just at this moment, Steward Li's voice could be heard coming from outside. Steward Li deferentially and respectfully waited at the side, with a serious expression said, Your Highness, people from Li Manor have come. In your view, how should we deal with them? Able to make Steward Li come personally, and also to disturb Nangong Liyuan, it could clearly be seen that the people who came from Li Manor were not weak. Nangong Liyuan frowned, casually waving his hand. Let Ling Feng go and handle it. He turned back, and was just about to hug Su Luo once again. Steward Li also didn't want to be a third wheel, but he was forced by the circumstances. So he had no choice but to force himself to finish saying everything in one breath. Reporting back to your highness, the elder ancestor of the Li Manor personally brought the second son of Li Manor to come for a visit. Do you think you ought to go meet them? Li family's elder ancestor Li Patian was a martial artist at the peak of 6th rank. By his strength alone, he had propped up the entire Li family and made it thrive. He was one of the top martial arts experts that could be counted on one hand in the capital. Normally, even when His Majesty the Emperor met him, he would treat him with a smiling expression. Li family's elder ancestor had personally come knocking on his door? A peculiar expression passed through Nangong Liyuan's ink-black eyes. He hugged Su Luo and held on to her slender waist, trying to please her by asking, Girl, do you want to go and see for yourself? Su Luo was also pondering this question at this time. She never expected that the Li family's elder ancestor, because of a piece of cyan-colored crystal stone, would personally drop by for a visit. Furthermore, this was also at the door of His Highness Prince Jin's manor. She could not hold out against the 100-year-old aristocratic Li family. However, This was what was called underneath a large tree was a good place to cool off in the shade. She had Nangong Luyan, this large tree present, she presumably wouldn't eat a loss. To say nothing of Lu Qingfeng continuing to slander her by saying that she stole his cyan-colored crystal stone. Humph, humph, not giving him a lesson to see. Then he would still think that the gods were number one, and he was number two. Su Luo raised an eyebrow, absent-mindedly casting a glance at Nangong Luyan. That old man from the Li family, could you beat him? Such a sharp girl, not leaving even a little leeway or face for him. Having heard what she said, Nangong Luyan started to laugh out loud. He lovingly and indulgently pinched Su Luo's nose, laughingly nodded. My family's Luo girl will watch with her own eyes. No matter what, this king won't lose. Chapter 285. To come knocking for a fight too. Then let's go see him and play with him properly. Su Luo's face was full of smiles, as she gave Nangong Luyan a push. You go first, I will follow soon after. Nangong Luyan gave Su Luo a considering glance. With his understanding of this girl for sure, she was about to con someone. However, he really liked this kind of sinister and cunning little girl, indeed. He was liking her more and more. Then good. This king will leave the people for you, waiting until you come and slowly play with them. Nangong Luyan smiled happily while rubbing her head. His Luo girl was seldom in the mood to toy with people. The youngster from the Li family really did have good fortune. Seeing Nangong Luyan's back gradually get further away, Su Luo's eyes narrowed slightly. The corner of her mouth lifted into a crafty smile. The main hall of Prince Jin's royal manor. His Highness Prince Jin languidly and nonchalantly leaned against the imperial chair, made of red sandalwood. His hands unhurriedly, one at a time, gripped the armrest of the chair. He indifferently cast sideways glances at the person sitting at the head seat under him. Lu Patian, Lu Manor's elder ancestor. At the same time, he was also Lu Manor's pillar. Actually, at this moment, he was also secretly measuring up Nangong Luyan. Lu Patian earlier had already heard about His Highness Prince Jing being the present-day talented genius. At a very young age, he was already a sixth-ranked expert. Among the younger generation, he was simply the person with the most outstanding talent. No one could hold a candle to him. If it was the past, he naturally wouldn't dare to offend His Highness Prince Jin, this type of gradually rising superstar. However now, humph, the corner of Lu Potion's mouth raised into a self-satisfied smile. Recently, his luck had been extremely good, simply as if he was helped by the gods. Yesterday, he unexpectedly, in one move, broke through the 6th rank and reached the 7th rank that people yearn for in their dreams. 7th rank, now in the empire of Eastern Ling. Who would dare to be arrogant and despotic in front of him, Lu Patian? Even His Highness Prince Jin, who was royalty, must now also defer somewhat to him, because of his cocky mindset. After advancing from Lu Qingfeng's mouth, he learned that originally, he almost took possession of a cyan-colored crystal stone, but it unexpectedly vanished all of a sudden. This made him now full of high fighting spirit, at any time wanting to look for a person to fight with to show off his formidable strength. How could Lu Patian endure and swallow this insult? Therefore, he didn't demur, bringing Lu Qingfeng along, and had aggressively arrived at Nangong Luyan's doorstep to seek an explanation. He had said he was here to seek an explanation, but in fact he was just here to demand the crystal stone. However, it seemed he still had a little intellect left, because he was afraid of the consequences. Since His Highness Prince Jin was so gifted strength and powerful, therefore his words, actions and bearing were still regarded as him exercising some restraint. In fact, Lu Patian was engrossed in his own excitement, so how could he know that His Highness Prince Jin a long time ago had entered the boundary of the 7th rank a step before him? As a result, this time he was doomed to fall down and flip over very hard. However, Lu Patian was unaware. Therefore, when he faced His Highness Prince Jin, he used the tone of an elder speaking down to a junior. One could only see him with an apathetic expression, staring fixedly at His Highness Prince Jin, coldly saying, "Your Highness, I heard on that day, the thief that stole Lu Manor's cyan-colored crystal stone was brought to your Highness's residence. Did this happen?" Lu Potion's manner and tone was condescending, not lacking the arrogance that manifested in his capacity as a 7th-ranked expert. Nangong Luyan merely cast him an indifferent glance. His expression was calm. Lu Patian, who lent you the courage to dare come and question this king? Lu Patian haughtily raised his eyebrow. Lu Qingfeng, this henchman on the side said, Your Highness Prince Jin, my grandfather is already a 7th-ranked expert. Even His Majesty treats my grandfather with extreme politeness. Your attitude should also lose some of the elegant demeanor of an imperial prince. Lu Qingfeng, this opportunist before he was super afraid of Nangong Luyan. Now that he knew that his grandfather had been promoted to the 7th rank, his manner immediately did a huge 180 degrees turn. Nangong Luyan's fair fingers, with the bones clearly outlined, lifted up a cyan-colored flowery porcelain teacup. His eyes dropped slightly as he drank a mouthful. Afterwards, he contentedly narrowed his phoenix eyes slightly. The vapors that rose in spirals concealed the gleam of light that flitted through his beautiful pitch-black eyes. Nobody was able to clearly see the deep meaning within his beautiful eyes. Chapter 286, To Come Knocking for a Fight 3. Nangong Luyan lifted his eyebrows slightly and coldly snorted out a sentence. 7th rank? Yes, my grandfather is now a 7th-ranked expert. Lu Qingfeng arrogantly lifted his head and stuck out his chest in an extremely proud manner. It seemed as if that 7th-ranked expert wasn't his grandfather, but he himself, who knew that Nangong Luyan's next sentence would make Lu Qingfeng mad enough to spit out blood. One could see Nangong Luyan merely leisurely set down his teacup and saucer. The corner of his mouth hooked into a smile that was as light as clouds and breeze. He unhurriedly casually asked a sentence. Lu elder ancestor is around 100 years old, right? The implication was that, at around 100 years old before reaching 7th rank, you have the nerve to flaunt it in front of this king? Weren't you even a little embarrassed? The more Nangong Luyan's behavior seemed light as the clouds and breeze, the more clearly he showed his contempt and disdain. Lu Patian heard what was said. Immediately, one of his breaths stifled in his throat. His pair of eyes glared at Nangong Luyan very fiercely, until they were the shape of copper bells. His pair of hands firmly clenched into fists, cursing secretly in his heart. Not knowing the immensity of heaven and earth. Little youth who hasn't even grown out all your hair. He was looking down on 7th rank. Could it be that he had also reached the 7th rank? For years on end, Lu Patian had always had an eminent status, due to his order and strength, among others being regarded as pretty good. He forcibly did his utmost to restrain his surging anger. Afterwards, the corner of his mouth lifted into a taunting sneer. Your Highness Prince Jin's vision is very high. Even a cultivator at the 7th rank isn't qualified in your eyes. Ha. Perhaps His Majesty himself doesn't even have a place in your eyes. These words simply hit too close to the heart. If the reply was not good, and it was spread out, then it would not only be the Crown Prince taking precautions against Prince Jin, on His Majesty's side, will also most likely be deeply afraid of the consequences. After all, Prince Jin was too outstanding. Nangong Luyan heard what was said. Then brilliant and vibrant lights appeared gleaming from within his eyes. The corner of his mouth slowly rose into a nefarious, demonic, alluring and shallow smile. His tone was soft and relaxed like goose feathers, but every word reeked of blood. Lu Patian, truth be told, this king indeed hadn't noticed you. When Lu Patian heard what was said, his expression became rigid. Afterwards, his expression became ashen as his anger surged up. This hateful Prince Jin. He actually dared to say these words in front of his face. This was the same as slapping him in the face on the spot. A very red blush rose on Lu Potion's face. He suddenly stood up. He glared at Nangong Luyan in a rage. Yet, before waiting for him to speak, Nangong Luyan faintly smiled and lifted an eyebrow, then unhurriedly said, However, Lu Patian, you as a very minor martial artist, would dare to mention yourself as on par to this king's emperor father? Or has your heart long ago had the desire to seize the throne? If Lu Potion's words intended to put a person's heart to death, then Nangong Luyan's words would simply put a person's heart and lungs to death. All 5 viscera and 6 bowels would be put to death. This kind of huge criminal charge descending down on him. How could Lu Patian hold himself back? If these words were to spread out, even if he was a 7th rank, so what? With the power of him as a single person, he was also unable to protect the entirely clan's peace. Your Highness, don't speak nonsense. This kind of huge accusation, the Lu family is unable to assume. A raging inferno was ignited in Lu Potion's eyes as he frostily glared at Nangong Luyan. Compared to Lu Potion's utterly discomfited expression, Nangong Luyan still seemed indifferent. He leisurely crossed one leg over the other, indulgently leaning back on the seat made out of red sandalwood, using a kind of disdainful of the entire world gaze, which landed on Lu Potion's body light as a feather. Oh, you cannot assume the responsibility. Then are you saying this king could? Such a 7th-ranked expert, who said words are their bond, yet lenient when treating their own words. Lu Patian swallowed a mouthful of blood that got stuck in his throat, unable to go up nor down. The feeling of being wrong choked him, and was extremely difficult to bear. Who was it that told him that His Highness was coldly detached with killing intent, and was ruthlessly cruel? Why was it that they didn't inform him that this evildoer had such a poisonous tongue? His mouth seemed to be dripping with poisonous juices, as every sentence stabbed straight through a person's heart. Chapter 287. To come knocking for a fight for. Lu Patian had come with an aggressive and overbearing attitude. However, with a few sentences said by His Highness Prince Jean, he was beaten into the dust. This made him very out of sorts, in an extremely bad mood. He must get this situation back under him. A 7th-ranked expert's dignity must not be trampled upon. Don't waste so many words. Your Highness should order that person who stole Lu Manor's cyan-colored crystal stone to come out. A sinister expression flashed through Lu Potion's eyes. A pair of eyes that sparkled radiantly glared at Nangong Luyan. However, the latter was still calmly reclining on top of the red sandalwood chair, and leisurely casting sideway glances at him. Stole the cyan-colored crystal stone from Lu Manor? When did Lu Manor even have a cyan-colored crystal stone? Why is it that this king didn't know? Lu Patian was immediately choked by this. His expression became exceptionally unsightly. A cyan-colored crystal stone, how rare and precious. Even if they really did have it, many families would be unlikely to tell outsiders about it. Because if the news were to spread out, it was the same as looking to beckon thieves to their own family. Moreover, on this continent, where robbers ran amok, no one could say with 100% certainty that their own residence was impenetrable. However, Lu Manor in recent years indeed didn't have a cyan-colored crystal stone. A few years ago they had some, but all of it was used by Lu Patian to promote to the next level. Now although he had advanced, however it was still not very stable. Therefore, he urgently needed a cyan-colored crystal stone to stabilize his cultivation. Lu Patian used the corner of his eyes to cast sidelong glances at Lu Qingfeng. Lu Qingfeng jumped out, loudly shouting exaggerated half-truths. Your Highness may not know, that piece of cyan-colored crystal stone is one that I got through gambling on stones at the raw materials marketplace. But who would have thought that that thief would be so devious and sly? He actually took advantage of me when I was unprepared and stole it. And also, that thief really did follow Your Highness in entering Prince Jin's royal manor. Your Highness Prince Jin, what more do you have to say now? Lu Qingfeng's every words were intended to punish. Every sentence was aimed at His Highness Prince Jin. The person was taken away by him. Then, that cyan-colored crystal stone naturally would also be in His Highness Prince Jin's hands. Otherwise, according to His Highness Prince Jin's perverse and cruel temperament, would he save a person out of kindness? Not only did Lu Qingfeng think this way, but Lu Patian naturally also had the same thought. Nangong Luyan gave a smile that was not quite a smile while raising an eyebrow. He unhurriedly said, leaving aside whether your Lu family really has a cyan-colored crystal stone or not mentioning if he really did, or didn't steal away you people's cyan-colored crystal stone, only speaking of saving a person, whether this king wants to save or not save a person. What do you people consider yourselves as, that you would dare to come offer your opinion to this king? His Highness Prince Jean was His Highness Prince Jean. When he spoke, he really was insensitive and didn't leave them any face. When he hit someone, he concentrated on slapping their faces. Not only was Lu Qingfeng choked, even Lu Patian was also choked by his words. The grandfather and grandson pair only now understood that His Highness Prince Jean really didn't take the 7th-rank Lu Patian seriously nor saw him as worthy. Lu Potion's ashen face glowered at Nangong Luyan. Your Highness, taking into consideration His Majesty's face, this elder won't bother about your part in this. However, you must hand over the person. That piece of cyan-colored crystal stone. You must also hand it over. Nangong Luyan stood up and raised his eyebrows slightly. If this king won't hand it over, then what are you going to do? Lu Potion's face was hard and cold. He was panting with rage as he stared at Nangong Luyan. His pair of malicious eyes had a vengeful expression. Then Your Highness Prince Jean shouldn't blame this elder for being impolite. This elder shall also stroll around for a visit in this Prince Jin's royal manor. Having heard what he said, Nangong Luyan very casually gestured with his hand. Okay then, go. Nobody would have foreseen that Nangong Luyan would let them go so casually. Lu Patian was even more bewildered and uncertain as he fixedly watched Nangong Luyan. Originally, the pair of feet that stomped out was once again retrieved back. Who wasn't aware that His Highness Prince Jean was treacherous, crafty, had high IQ and was widely known as two-faced. God knows what kind of plot he had arranged that was waiting for him. Lu Patian thought up to here and instead stopped moving. What? Afraid to go? With one sentence, Nangong Luyan was able to expose Lu Potion's weak spot. Chapter 288. To Come Knocking for a Fight 5. The muscles in Lu Potion's cheeks jerked. Would speaking nicely kill His Highness Prince Jean? Every phrase was as sharp as the edge of a sword, jabbing straight at a person's heart. Your Highness, may I offer you a word of advice? It's better that you hand over the person and crystal stone without delay. Otherwise, if this disturbance were to get to His Majesty, I'm afraid it won't look good. Lu Patian sat down, coldly glaring at Nangong Luyan. He was saying this by relying on flaunting his influence. This time, Nangong Luyan didn't even bother to take notice of this 7th-rank expert. His phoenix eyes narrowed slightly, and in an indifferent tone, launched a question at Lu Qingfeng. You are certain that that piece of cyan-colored crystal stone is yours? His Highness Prince Jin's words were as sharp and icy as the edge of a blade. He only looked at Lu Qingfeng understatedly, but Lu Qingfeng still felt as if he was placed into an ice house. A whiff of icy air shot up rapidly from the soles of his feet. It spread to all 4 limbs and numerous bones of his body, until his entire body became so stiff that he was practically unable to move. His Highness Prince Jin's eyes were too bright and too clear, and with only one glance, the deepest and darkest places in his heart were nearly all illuminated. It was as if all the secrets he had were spread out in front of him. Under the watchful and indifferent eyes of His Highness Prince Jean, Lu Qingfeng's heart felt weak. He quietly turned his head away. Ahem! Lu Patian let out a heavy snort sound. His pair of eyes were full of fire, shooting towards Lu Qingfeng. Lu Qingfeng suddenly returned to his senses. Right. Now that grandfather was already a 7th-rank expert, he was stronger than His Highness Prince Jin's 6th rank. At this point of time, he completely didn't need to be afraid of His Highness Prince Jean. Totally didn't need to. After providing courage to strengthen his heart, Lu Qingfeng suddenly lifted his head up. He firmly looked at Nangong Luyan with a deadly earnest expression. Stressing each word, he said, Yes, that cyan-colored crystal stone is mine. That day, it was cut out from a source stone I had bought at Old Chen's place in the raw materials marketplace. Who can bear witness to this? A clear and resonant voice came from behind a screen. Taking a look after blinking, it actually turned out to be from a young man, wearing a large, blue, Chinese-styled robe. This young man's facial features were pretty common, completely lacking any distinguishing quality. He was the kind that couldn't be found when submerged in a crowd of people. However, his pair of eyes flashed with a distinct spirited manner. They were liquid-like, glossy and quick-witted. Once seen, they were hard to forget. When Nangong Luyan saw Su Luo made up like this, he silently turned his face away. He had already guessed before that when Su Luo made him leave first, it was precisely because she wanted to disguise herself like this. Didn't expect that he had really guessed correctly. However, with regards to this kind of outcome, Nangong Luyan was not at all very happy. Why? In fact, the explanation was very simple. Su Luo appearing and choosing to use this disguise clearly expressed her desire not to expose her real identity in front of other people. And she had even concealed her true gender, preventing Nangong Luyan from holding her hand openly and above board, and thus declaring that Luo girl was his people. He knew this girl was fond of disguising herself as a pig that could devour a tiger. He also knew that her heart had some misgivings, therefore he had indulged her all along. He had spoiled and pampered her. Regardless of what choices she made, he would support her. Completely opposite of Nangong Luyan's reaction. When Lu Qingfeng saw Su Luo, he was extremely happy. He jumped up and loudly shouted, "Humph! You shameless thief, you actually have the courage to show yourself. Quickly hand over the cyan-colored crystal stone." Su Luo smiled faintly and shot Lu Qingfeng a glance. With an innocent and perplexed expression she said, "Why should I hand over the cyan-colored crystal stone to you? Do I owe you something?" Although Lu Qingfeng kept on telling others that that cyan-colored crystal stone was what he got when gambling on stones. However, in his and Su Luo's heart, they both understood that piece of crystal stone had been won from gambling by Su Luo and had nothing to do with Lu Qingfeng. Therefore, under the gaze of Su Luo's pair of clear black eyes, both of Lu Qingfeng's cheeks burned hotly, and his heart had some self-doubt. Chapter 289. To come knocking for a fight 6. When Lu Patian saw Lu Qingfeng's cringing appearance, his heart became somewhat angry, even though he could also see that something was amiss with Lu Qingfeng. Since the matter had already blown up to this degree, they must continue until the end, even if it could be considered highway robbery in public. Therefore, he let out a heavy cough. Lu Qingfeng's expression recovered. His eyes opened wide as he glared at Su Luo, letting out a few heavy hum sounds. That cyan-colored crystal stone was obviously won by me through betting. It was undoubtedly you who stole it from my hand. Now you are trying to pretend to be innocent. This really is ridiculously funny. Su Luo pushed back without the slightest hesitation. Ridiculously funny? The most ridiculous one is you, Lu Qingfeng, right? That cyan-colored crystal stone, I clearly won from betting. How does it even have half a hair relating to you? You, Lu Qingfeng choked back a breath in his chest and glared at Su Luo while spitting in rage. You? Don't tell me you really believe that if it was good stuff and you, as the young master of the Lu family, took a fancy to it after a glance, then that stuff would automatically belong under your name? You really think that gods are number one, and you are number two? This really makes me laugh to death. Su Luo unceremoniously whirled around and circled Nangong Luyan's side before taking a seat. She fetched the teapot, and without regard for others, poured a cup of tea for herself, and unhurriedly drank it. She actually completely ignored him. Lu Qingfeng was infuriated until he almost stomped his foot, and with his finger pointed at her. You are simply talking nonsense. That piece of source stone originally belonged to me. If you don't believe it, we can go and ask old Chen. However, he personally handed over that piece of source stone to me during our transaction. Yeah, this point is actually correct. Nobody expected that after drinking a mouthful of tea, Su Luo actually followed along with Lu Qingfeng and admitted it. Then, how dare you say that piece of cyan-colored crystal stone is not mine? Lu Qingfeng triumphantly raised his eyebrow. That piece of cyan-colored crystal stone of course isn't yours. Su Luo used an expression of looking at an idiot when casting Lu Qingfeng a glance. Ha ha ha! Lu Patian suddenly burst into loud laughter. He sneered repeatedly as he glared at Su Luo. His whole body emitted a powerful pressure that was particular to a 7-rank expert. That powerful deterrence was completely directed at Su Luo. Mentally deranged, loathsome boy. Just now, you frankly admitted that that piece of source stone is Lu Qingfeng's. Why would you refuse to admit to it afterwards? You are simply contradicting yourself. When Lu Patian released his power to pressure Su Luo, Nangong Liuyun's eyes were motionless, as was his body, but he easily hindered and returned that powerful pressure. At the same time, Su Luo also started to laugh heartily. Lu family's old grandpa, the mentally deranged person is you, right? Could it be that your family's treasured grandson didn't tell you? When he cut that source stone in half, his brain convulsed and he sold it to me, okay? Lu Potion's complexion immediately became ashen. His Highness Prince Jin scorning him could be ignored, naturally because that person had the strength to. Now a very small youngster actually dared to use that kind of attitude to speak to him? Could it be that he didn't know that he was a 7th rank expert? 7th rank. In fact, Lu Patian was also a little dejected. Before, his impression of a 7th rank expert was that of a very formidable existence. It was a powerful existence that was above almost all the people and cultivators. However, in Prince Jin's royal manor, he, as a 7th rank, kept eating losses and being quelled. Elder Ancestor Lu's anger quickly attacked his heart, to the extent that he didn't take notice of the meaning in Su Luo's words. Still, it was Nangong Luoyun who couldn't put up with it any longer, and he let out a clear cough. He advised Elder Ancestor Lu. Lu Patian, did you clearly hear what Su Yin just said? Your family's wastrel personally sold that half of source stone to Su Yin. This you cannot blame it on others. Chapter 290. To come knocking for a fight. 7. Lu family's elder ancestor originally was just about to burst with rage. After having heard what was said, all of a sudden, he quivered from head to toe. What? It was actually Lu Qingfeng who had personally sold the source stone to this youngster? This was not possible. Elder Ancestor Lu's eyes was like electricity as it shot towards Lu Qingfeng. Lu Qingfeng's heart was extremely nervous. He was one of the people involved. How could he not know the truth? Under Elder Ancestor Lu's menacing gaze, Lu Qingfeng's tough attitude rose as he very fiercely glared at Su Luo. At that time when I had cut it in half, if it was not for your puppy that came and urinated on it, how could I have sold you a source stone that I had only cut in half? Stop dreaming, Su Luo carelessly said. At that time, who was it that had spent 100 gold coins to buy a source stone? You obviously had already cut it in half, but because of my spirit pet urinating on it, you forced me to spend 1,000 gold coins to buy it? Lu Qingfeng, don't tell me you have amnesia and don't remember these things. So as it turned out, there was this part of the whole story. Nangong Luoyun, having heard what was said, in his heart he secretly felt that this was laughable. The matters on this earth, the first time was a coincidence, but the second time might not be. A little spirit pet, for no rhyme or reason, would go pee on it? Lu Qingfeng wanted to extort Luo girl using blackmail, but instead, he lost a watermelon when picking up a sesame seed. Where would there be such a coincidence in this world? Through his understanding of Luo girl, if you were to say that this trap was not planned by her, he would never believe it. However, just for this reason, he liked his family's Luo girl more and more. She was smart, two-faced, cunning and treacherous, practically identical to him. On this earth, he would never find another young lady like her that fit him so perfectly. A myriad train of thoughts were going through Nangong Liuyun's mind. The only thing left in Lu family's elder ancestor's brain was rage. Grandpa, it's not like that. How could Lu Qingfeng admit that he had wanted to extort the other party through blackmail? But instead the other party succeeded. This kind of meaning. He grasped hold of and pulled at the corner of Lu Potion's clothing, almost kneeling. Grandpa, this clearly is a plan he set up from the start. Otherwise, if everything was fine, then why would that little puppy run over and piss over it? Lu Patian usually had a condescending and arrogant temper, and he was most biased when covering up errors, to the point where you simply could not reason with him. One could see him coldly snorting repeatedly. Since that is the case, then also offer up that puppy. 1,000 gold coins was it, Qingfeng? Give him 1,000 gold coins. When Lu Qingfeng saw his grandfather with this kind of attitude, he promptly straightened his back. He smugly took out a small bag of gold coins from his chest pouch and threw it at Su Luo. Afterwards he stretched out his hand. Take it, "In here is about 1,000 gold coins, let you off lightly. Quickly return the cyan-colored crystal back to me. Furthermore, also hand over that vile puppy." Su Luo looked at Lu Qingfeng, as if looking at an idiot. This person's head was ill, right? First, not even mentioning the cyan-colored crystal stone, which was worth 50,000 gold coins. Just considering her little divine dragon, he was a priceless treasure. Even if you sell off the entire capital of Eastern Ling Empire, it was not enough to quell the venerable divine dragon's anger. This Lu Qingfeng had actually only taken out 1,000 gold coins, and wanted to obtain both the cyan-colored crystal stone and the little divine dragon? Should it be said that he had an illness, or that he was delusional? Su Luo sneered as the corner of her mouth lifted. 1,000 gold coins? What is it for? Money to buy tea as an offer of apology? Hey, a word of advice to you, don't go too far. This sky in Prince Jin's royal manor might not be able to cover the top of your head forever. Lu Qingfeng's threat was already exceptionally clear. Nangong Luyan single-handedly held Su Luo in his arms. He unsympathetically cast him a sidelong glance. This king's people, you are certain you want to move against? If he were to move, Nangong Luyan absolutely would make him forever lose that chance to go against Su Luo, even before he started to move. Lu Qingfeng's heart was immediately startled. Chapter 291, To Come Knocking for a Fight, 8 His Highness Prince Jin. How could he? Lu Qingfeng was simply incredulous. Didn't all the rumors say that His Highness Prince Jin was cruel and unfeeling? How could he care this much about this person? Moreover, this person is a young male. Lu Patian took a step forward, shielding Lu Qingfeng by placing him behind. Your Highness, hand over that person. Otherwise, if this was to arrive in front of His Majesty, nobody would look good. It doesn't look good for you. It doesn't matter to this king. Nangong Luyan coldly smiled while saying, Why would this king care if you tell him slanderous accusations? Lu Patian had a breathful of air choked back in his lungs. He knew then that negotiating with reason wasn't feasible. If so, there was only the use of force to settle this issue. Since it is like this, then let the gods decide. Lu Patian, since a moment ago after Nangong Luyan had blocked him, a restrained fear was born in his heart for Nangong Luyan. So he took advantage of this situation and suggested, Then let Qingfeng and that young man compete with each other in martial arts. See who will win, and who will be defeated. Whoever wins will be given the cyan-colored crystal stone. This obviously was an unfair deal. The cyan-colored crystal stone clearly belonged to Su Luo. If she was to lose, then the crystal would vanish. How could Nangong Luyan let Su Luo agree to this unfair deal? He was just about to let out a few ridiculing words, but was pulled to a stop by Su Luo. Lu Qingfeng had slandered her, and Lu Elder had aggressively brought people over, looking for a fight. Su Luo was always fond of holding a grudge. How could she let them off this simply? Even if her martial strength wasn't good, she still must make them cry until they ran out of tears through hidden means, before she would let them go. Su Luo carelessly smiled. She looked at Lu Elder, the mockery in her eyes extremely obvious. Your scheme was calculated really well. If you lost, you won't suffer even a tiny bit of loss. If you win, not only can you retaliate against me, you will also obtain the cyan-colored crystal stone free of charge. This business transaction you set up is indeed profitable, and with no loss. Lu Elder, you can really calculate, You proved worthy of being able to buy such a huge estate for Lu Manor. Admirable, admirable. Those kind of remarks, while speaking, carried satire. The speech directly made Lu Elder practically unable to lift his head up. He, a respected elder, had been cultivating in seclusion for 10 years. He never expected that once he came out, he would immediately eat a huge loss. His reputation was cut away by such a minor young man, without leaving him even a little bit of face. He had a suspicion whether he might or might not have clashed with Prince Jin's royal manor, due to an offense. Why was it that there was two people who both had sharp mouths full of pointed teeth? It seemed as if their lips were smeared with poisonous juices, and every word they spoke was extremely ear-piercing. The corner of Nangong Luyan's mouth lifted into a satisfied smile. His Luo girl would never let him be disappointed. He had an exuberant smiling expression as he gazed at Su Luo. An intoxicating expression like a gentle wave flashed through his pair of peach blossoms like limpid eyes. Usually, if women took a quick glance at this, they would very likely miss their wedding. However, Su Luo turned a blind eye to his expression. With one move, she pushed him to the side, because she disliked him blocking her line of sight. Nangong Luyan helplessly sighed. Why was his Luo girl this hard to chase after? Seeing Lu Elder furiously glaring at his Luo girl, Nangong Luyan was dissatisfied with this. He let out a few humph, clearing his throat. Nangong Luyan raised his eyes and cast sideways glances at him. What? Lu Patian, could it be you want to fly into a rage out of humiliation? Lu Elder held back a mouthful of blood in his throat to the point that his complexion was red. Nangong Luyan appeared to have not seen it, and indifferently said, Since that's not the case, then use a fair deal for this competition. The cyan-colored crystal stone in Su Yun's hand is worth 50,000 gold coins. Your Lu Manor is also not a pauper. Take out 50,000 gold coins to bet. Whoever wins, both the crystal stone and the gold coins will all go to the winning party. Now this is fair. Lu Patian thought indeed it was fair this way. In addition, just a moment ago, he had already sensed him. The opposing young man basically didn't even have a little bit of spirit strength. He was a complete little waste material. How could Su Luo win against his family's treasured grandson? That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.